to the Retrograde video game podcast, where this week we talk about the best games of all time.
Wow, what a topic. My name is Andrew Bascom, and with me, as always, is the Beast Boy of podcasting, Mr. Beast Boy himself.
Mikey and Ali Aaronworth. Because I'm the greatest, baby.
Wow, well done. Hope all you Dune heads were really liking that one there.
You know what's tough, Andrew, is I already struggled with making up a name for myself at the beginning of this podcast because I've done it for whatever 7,000 episodes up to this date.
Yeah.
And that was hard enough when it was just a strict scripted back and forth, when I knew what name was coming. The Bad Boy of Podcasting, the name that I earned for myself through hard work and doing bad things all the time.
Yeah.
I have to announce myself at parks.
Get rid of all my trench coats.
Now that you've changed the script on me, it's harder for me to get into that mode of saying the name.
I'll tell you too, we're just getting rid of the obvious ones. Then we'll get a little bit more elaborate in the last couple of weeks here.
The Beast Boy of Podcasting. I still
wait until it's more than one word. You know, like something of podcasting.
Well, the listeners have been gracious
Bitch Boy,
enough.
Sorry.
Bitch Boy was
Bitch Boy was
a
one
good
of them.
one. Well, no, Bitch Boy, Bad Boy. That's one word as well.
That's true. Boy was still there. I should have said Bitch Boy.
Bitch Boy.
So I think we should say the thing off the top.
Okay.
Is that what we talked about the last episode, at the end of the episode, because we wanted to, it was only for the true heads that would get to the end of the episode to find out the news, that the Retrograde is no longer going to be a weekly podcast starting the end of the month. We are going to be popping on to do lots of things. I've already thought of one topic that I'm like, well, we got to go back to the Retrograde and talk
100%,
about that.
yeah.
The Mr. McMahon documentary, the trailer came out a couple days ago as of recording. But we're not going to be doing weekly episodes. We are going to be moving on to another project, and we are hoping you'll continue with us, but we'll still be popping on the Retrograde. So please continue subscribing, because we'll have lots of things to come on and talk about.
Yeah, I think a lot more punchy, pointed, almost short form content a lot of the time, especially on our YouTube channel, some gameplay segments and stuff like that. That'll be good. Content that's more suited to YouTube. You know, long form content isn't very well suited for YouTube. We found that when we put up a 20-minute video, it always does better, like the gameplay portion, than like a full hour episode or something. The podcast still does well, and we'll find ways to contribute to that as well. But yeah, stay subscribed to all the channels, and we appreciate all the support. And
We're not going anywhere. We're not
exactly.
going anywhere. Like this whole idea that it's like a goodbye. It's like, it's just not every week, but we're still going to be around all the time as we move on to another project, which will be announced soon enough.
Yeah, and that's why we're taking on projects as big as this one. This week, we're doing the top 10 games of all time. You know, we've gotten into these list episodes. Our podcast has changed forms a couple times since its incarnation about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
This one is one that we've always had circled, but it's like, we obviously can't do the 10 best, because where do you go from there?
Well, exactly.
The 10
It
best
always
games of
feels
all
like
time?
near the end. And now we're not near the end, but it's like, what are the topics we really wanted to nail here?
100%. 100%.
You know?
That's why we did A Link to the Past last week, which is one of the, most well-regarded games of all time. Will it be on any of our lists? Who knows?
Oh my.
Oh my. Oh me. Oh my.
I'm so curious about your list.
I'm very curious about your list as well.
No, I think my list is very predictable.
I don't know about that, because we'll get into this on the other side of just our general gaming updates, because you and I have been playing a couple games and there's some stuff in the news, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll get into our top 10 games. But before we do, what I will say to kind of tease that is, there are the games that I know you love the most, but then there are also the games that have had the biggest effect on you over time, which aren't necessarily the games you pick up now. And this is the same thing that I struggled with. So where I landed on that, where it's like a game that was very influential when I was a kid versus something that I could pick up and play now, where you situate those, like a game that came out this year versus a game that came out 40 years ago.
You're so right. And we're going to get to the qualifiers in a bit here, because that was the toughest thing, is going, what makes the best game of all time?
Yes.
To me, obviously. Okay, so before
Pay to play, for me, I think, is what it is.
Yeah, microtransactions.
Microtransactions is what
I was
makes
like,
it the best.
I love giving up money.
I have money, so I have an advantage over everyone.
Darth Vader, please. Speaking of, I'm playing Star Wars Outlaws. This was my number one most anticipated game of the year.
And it's worked out fine.
See, here's the thing I want to talk about. Star Wars, when I was up until the day of the release, not the early release, because I didn't pre-order. Stay strong, my guys.
Yes.
I was so excited. I saw it and I was like,
were you worried though that you didn't pre-order the digital copy, so maybe they'd be sold out by the time the release happened?
Yeah, I was worried they didn't make enough digital copies.
Yeah, that's what I would be worried
at the
about.
digital factory. Yeah,
this NFT society has now limited the production run of video games.
You know what the worst part is? Like, you get it 3 days early. That's enough for me to go like, well, you know,
if there is something like Ubisoft is pretty good with stuff like that, enticing you to, or even to pre, like Ratchet and Clank. I did that. I downloaded it and then had it ready to go at midnight and played at midnight.
Yes,
that's kind of cool. But apart from that, from a pre-order standpoint, just to get it a little early, I don't get the point.
Okay, so this game, if you don't know, is about Cave S, an outlaw. Let's think a Harrison Ford type here.
Dashing rogue.
Solo. What's that?
A dashing rogue?
A dashing rogue who has no affinity to anyone and is just trying to survive in this crazy world of Star Wars. And so I was so excited for this because it's an open world game. I really love open world games.
Yeah.
People like compared this to like Red Dead kind of thing of like, you're just a solo traveler and you just got to decide who you're going to be in this world.
Sure.
Oh, in Star Wars, that's great. And the one thing I've always complained about with you about Star Wars is like, just make me a nobody. Don't bring up a Skywalker. And I'll just traverse the world.
Like what the Mandalorian tried to do in season 1.
Yeah, until they almost immediately go like, it's Yoda.
Yes.
You're like, well, no, it's not, but it's like, it is. And you're like, no. So yes, I agree with that idea. And so I was like, I'm so excited for this. And then you start seeing the early reviews and you go, oh no. And you see it on social media and you saw it unwritten, but I would say it's mostly on social, mostly on TikTok, where you had specifically men that we're like, this fucking piece of shit. They're like mad, right? Like mad about it. And I just... And then you see other ones, you start seeing reviews, you're like, I love this game, I love living in the world, it's like Red Dead. And I can tell you, after playing it, it's not. But I just want to say, more than before I get into the reviews of the games, Star Wars makes people's brains melt.
Yes.
They make them malfunction to the point that if the next World War will be started over Star Wars. I am so positive. I can't believe the amount of vitriol over this game.
And it ironically will take place over the sea.
Yes.
It's going to be real cool. Well, because the ice caps will have flooded.
Absolutely. Greta Thunberg will have her gang of minions. Here's my thing, because I'm going to chase to the end before I talk about the details. This game is fine. It's not great. It's not bad. It is a totally fine game. And I don't understand people that are losing their minds one way or another. And I would say mostly negative, but losing my mind one way or another.
I'm going to look it up as we're talking here, because the Metacritic was pretty low, I think, as of release, but not so low to be like, this is going to be like, this is actually a bad game. So it's a 76.
Yeah,
that's totally fine.
I was going to say it's a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And guess what? 7 out of 10 is playable.
Like more than playable. Like here's the thing about video games, and I understand it because there's so much more of a time commitment to video games. But if you told me a movie was a 75 out of 100, like a 75%, I'd be like 100%. I'll see that this weekend. Why not?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
The problem with a video game is that it's 30 hours of your life.
It's just under that, supposedly on main story.
Yeah.
It's way more than that because there's so much content in there.
For sure.
With side stuff. I'll get into my pros and cons here. I want to say off the top, Mikey, you'll hate this game.
I had a feeling. Yeah.
You will hate this game.
And why is that?
The open world free choice nature of it is drowning in option of, do you want to help this guy? Do you want to save this person?
Yeah,
do you want to do that?
Yeah.
There's a vault over there. There's this, to the point that I have to look at the journal, which is where you keep all your missions, and constantly go like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm so far away from the main story because I just keep looking at like, the huts have like a vault I can go into.
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay, let's do that. I'm just the more I'm like, Mike, you would absolutely hate this.
Is this the kind of thing? Because my issue with that isn't that there's so much to do. It's that it dilutes the gameplay because the way in which you do the incredible number of side missions that you have is very repetitive. So like I always use the diving bell missions from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where I'm like, the only way to get this check mark off the map is to play something for 10 minutes that I don't enjoy doing.
That's exactly it.
So that I won't touch this game.
You won't, because the thing is, a stronger person could avoid this and just go with but you and I are not these people. I can't do it. I can't either. So, because one of the biggest pros of this game is the story. The story is really good.
Is it really?
It's really cool. Captivating. Yeah. You have this character who is down on their luck and is nobody and just keeps building her way in this, criminal underworld type story. It is more Nathan.
Heroin? Selling heroin?
No heroin. I don't know if they've addressed drugs, to be perfectly honest. A lot of gambling. That
leaves a big wide open market if no one's touching them.
Yeah.
You should do that.
I should, and they should have come up with like a fun name for it.
Ooh.
Like Moon Rocks or something.
Moon Rocks is great.
Yeah.
Moon Rocks. Get
But
your Moon
they
Rocks
talk
out.
about booze. They talk about gambling. It's funny they don't talk about drugs. This is more Nathan Drake than it is Red Dead Redemption because there is so much stealth in it. There's so much of you are one character with a blaster, which in the context of the story, I like. You're one character with a blaster. You're not going to take down the Empire.
Sure.
And so the idea that you're breaking into Empire fortresses and strongholds is fun, but the second that you are found, you're like, oh, I have no chance here.
It was the moment I realized this game wasn't going to be for me. I mean, open world Star Wars, I love Star Wars, and I have the capacity to like open world games, but Ubisoft, open world Star Wars, I was like, I don't know about that. And that was kind of the first tease of this that we got. Back, it was like Gamescom probably a couple of years ago. And then when they showed the gameplay trailer and it was all stealth, I was like, I'm going to hate this game. I don't love, especially in an open world game, stealth. It is the only way they do that is because the only reason they do that is they just want to slow down the pacing to justify how one person can do so many things. But here's a question I'll put to you.
Yeah.
How often in a game that requires stealth do you enjoy the stealth segments?
I enjoy the stealth segments when the payoff. Because I'm like, I'm smarter than everybody. I love that part. I love it's like a game of Mousetrap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Batman, Assassin's Creed, but there was a Hitman. Hitman's the biggest one.
Great. Batman is a great example of stealth for me.
And all of a sudden you're like, all the enemies are dead, and they didn't even notice I was here. Like that, I love that. I also will say,
do you have an example of bad stealth in your mind?
That's a good question. I probably buried it. The only reason I say all this is because it's organic that this story makes sense that it is stealth.
Yeah.
You are one person. You are battling gangs. And I love all the gangs and the types of people that you have. The Hutts are one of them. And you have good reputation, bad reputation with them, depending on what you do. If you help them out,
it's a great idea.
Caught trespassing. Yeah. I like that. And it doesn't feel frustrating, even though at times it is frustrating because you're like, well, yeah, what am I going to do? Go in firing? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Other positive. You have a sidekick.
He's a little
animal.
Stitch-like character.
His name is Nix.
Nix.
And within 7 minutes, I turned to my player one and I said, I will kill for Nix. Nix is the best. Nix is fucking cute as all hell. And second of all, is actually useful. He does things you can tell him to attack, steal, open vaults, fetch things that you can't get. He can distract, which is the cutest thing in the world. When you at a thing, he'll just play dead and they're like, what the hell? And they kick him a little bit and he's like, oh, and he runs away and you just run behind the guy. I fucking love this.
I always tried to do things like that with the horses in Red Dead. Yes. And they just wouldn't let me do it. I would tell the horse, go steal that. Go steal from that guy. Go take his gun.
Right.
Go clomp his head.
Yeah, yeah.
And he wouldn't
go say
it.
Hello.
So, I would put peanut butter in his mouth and everything.
You would do Mr. Ed.
I would Mr. Ed him. And he wouldn't, I would just shoot him in the fucking head.
Yeah. Stupid horse.
Stupid horse. How dare you not do the thing? It's a video game.
I'm sure we'll talk about Red Dead later.
Dirge.
But is that I absolutely love that, and I love the characters that they do. If the advantage of being in this game and an open world is that you get to live in a world of Star Wars, they nailed that part of it.
Great.
Because you go through markets, and every different type of race of species of people is there, and they're all talking their own languages.
I thought that would have put you off a little bit, actually.
No, I love it. They're just not humans. Okay. Yeah. Is that... And
that's what you say about other races on Earth, too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Build that wall. Is it that you do feel like you're part of it? People are trying to rip you off. People are trying to sell you something. Can I help you? There are Imperial people that are like moles and they don't like it, so they're trying to give you information for money.
Yeah,
there's all this stuff where you're like, you get to. I'm on Tatooine right now.
Cool.
Which originally I was like, don't do this.
Don't go back.
Don't you dare do this.
It's a large universe. Why are we doing this?
And I go to the cantina. I'm like, God damn it. And you know what? No, it's just cool because you're like, I know most of this stuff.
See, the settings in the back, because the problem is if you get too far removed from Tatooine and the touchstones in Star Wars, then it isn't Star Wars.
It's just glibbery gloop.
Exactly.
We're walking to this planet you've never heard of.
It's a space opera.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be diluted because Star Wars has actually made a bunch of different variants of planets and stuff. And this is going to be another one of those. Don't make me Luke Skywalker going into the cantina. But if you make me
young Jedi, which that's why I didn't like those other games. What were the games right before this? There was two of them.
Survivor.
Yeah. I was just like, you're a Jedi. I'm like, nah, man, I don't know. Whatever.
Cal Cestus or whatever.
Yeah. I'll make this short. I just got a couple more things. There's a poker game called Sabacc, and there's another thing called splicing, which is essentially hacking. They do this with symbols. You don't see the numbers. You can turn on the numbers if you want to, and you want to cheat, whatever. But there are symbols. I am amazed at the number of things that they taught you within 10 minutes. and you're like, well, I know how to play that game, or I know how to splice these things very easily.
That's cool.
And I found that to be like very impressive.
Are they borrowing from another game? Because I know Ubisoft will kind of take their mechanics, and do you recognize it from anywhere? It's pretty.
It is poker essentially, but it's like 2-card poker, and you're trying to match, not get patterns.
Okay.
And it's fun, and you have to go beat a bunch of high rollers around the universe.
Nice.
And it's fun. And also Nix can help you cheat.
Of course.
He goes behind their wheels, and he's like, and you're like, thanks.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
And they can catch him, whatever.
Oh, Nix.
Yeah, I know. And then you have a mouthy robot that's one of your partners too, and I love him because he doesn't care if you live or die.
What is your stance on mouthy robots?
They can be very annoying.
Yeah.
But this one is so cynical that they're like, well, what if I die? And he's like, so be it. And you're like, okay, dark robot, got it. All right, cool. It's because he doesn't work for me. He works for somebody else. Okay. I'm not going to reveal the story. Here are the cons. Here are the 2 cons, major ones. This is
Shaka, number 1.
What's that?
Shaka, number 1.
Shaka Khan.
Genghis, number 2.
James. Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
Oh, there's 3 cons.
Yeah. Air.
Air, of
yeah.
course. Mm-hmm. Well, that's first name.
Yes. Yeah. Air, Con. Here are 2 things that you kind of get used to in an open world that this game does not do. Okay. And I think there are reasons why. I just don't think they're good reasons. The blaster. You only can use your blaster.
Okay.
So you only have it's a handgun essentially. And you can upgrade it to like the cows come home. It gets insane how much you can do.
They do have cows in this universe.
No, they're banthas and they're big and furry. And you can pet every animal. Can I tell you that?
That's
you can
great.
Pet every animal.
More games are doing this, and I'm on board with it.
And every time I get to pet a huge bantha and it breathes its steam on you, and I'm like, oh, look at this thing. But this is going to be 2 things. The speeder and the blaster are the only 2. This is the only vehicle and the only gun that you can have in possession and update and customize.
Okay.
If I knock down a stormtrooper, I can pick up its blaster. But the second I have to do anything, like climb something, get on my speeder, I drop it. I can't holster a second weapon.
So you say that, if I'm reading you right, as though it's a negative.
It is, because most open world games we've had for the last, honestly, 20 years is you get a choice of an inventory of guns that you get to use. Pretty much any game you think of this open world, you usually get to have a second gun.
Yeah.
This one you don't. Now, I understand that the idea is like you have your blaster and you can customize it like crazy.
Yeah.
That, okay, is fun. And it's the same with the speeder. You can customize it like crazy. I can't get in like any other type of vehicle. I can't get in anything.
You can't fly
so I fly, I have a ship called the Trailblazer, but anytime I'm on a surface, even like the Stormtroopers ones or something else that I can't use any other one.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's funny because at first I was like, when it comes to the weapon thing, there is a choice you can make in some games that I think are better for the gameplay. If you're like Sekiro is an example where there's one weapon that you can use and you can customize that weapon in a bunch of different ways, but it makes it so that the combat with that sword is so perfect. Yeah. It's so crisp. Is Ubisoft doing that with their blaster? I don't know. But there is an argument to be made that maybe they could. But in an open world game like that, when you're obviously going to be getting comparisons to GTA and Red Dead and all that, it's weird to stick you with only a blaster and only one speeder.
There is so much you can do to customize and grab stuff and fetch stuff and build your costume and build the paint on your speeder and the Trailblazer, which is your ship. Like all that kind of stuff. There is so much customization that you're kind of like, I can't even get on that speeder.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. Like I can't be in an AT-AT, which are there. Like
do they have any like meta comments on it? Like does she go up to it and be like, oh, I don't have my driver's license?
Yeah. How does that work? You know, like or something like that. No, but the speeder thing is worse. The gun thing I can almost get my head around a little bit because they're like, well, you can pick it up and shoot it. Yeah. But the second it's out of bullets, you're dropping that thing. It's like, okay.
That's like almost a Tears of the Kingdom thing where they encourage you to get like to pick up a bunch of different weapons and to try it. And that's a type of gameplay that I don't love, but the argument towards it is like, if you don't love it, then you don't love the gameplay itself. That's what it wants you to do. And some people really like that. It forces you to recycle things and cycle through and almost just like scavenge for a weapon here or there. And then when it's done, it's done. But yeah, I think I generally fall more on the side of like, give me my thing that makes it feel more like the play style that I want. Yeah.
So, in long, this game is totally fine. It is with its flaws. There are positives. I will beat it because I'm curious about the story and I want to see how this goes a little bit. And I know I'm going to beat it will be because when I tire of the game, I'll just be like, oh, mainline story. Let's go. Let's ride it to the end.
See, that's the difference between you and me. When I'm in an open world game and I'm like, I'm tired of this, I'll put it down and have no problem not having finished the main story.
Yeah.
It's not about that for me in an open world. Like Fallout, I've never finished a Fallout game. I've never finished an Elder Scrolls game. I've never finished Assassin's Creed game. Yeah. Oh yeah. But I've put hundreds of hours into these games. Yes. It's just like, it's not about the mainline story to me. Yeah.
I'm sure when I beat this game, it'll be after we're done with weekly episodes.
True.
So I'm sure I'll come back on to be like, do you want to talk for 10 minutes?
Sure,
about Outlaws just for the end? Because I want to know how the story ends. But otherwise, I am enjoying myself, and no one's going to slow me down with that. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. 75 out of 100 is good.
That's what I'm saying.
It's no reason to turn your nose up at a game. I want to get to our top 10, but before I do, there's not a ton of time for me to what?
Oh, yeah. No, it's okay.
When are they going to get to the fireworks factory?
That's it. Back to Winnipeg.
The game that I've been playing lately has been on my mind for the same reason as you bring up Star Wars Outlaws. It's totally fine. And that doesn't mean it's fine as in like I'm just going to play this and not feel anything. Totally fine can be very enjoyable, just not upper tier enjoyable, like best games of all time. And that's what I've been playing in Lies of P, which is a game that came out forever ago. And I actually kind of turned my nose up at when it first came out.
You turned your nose up at it?
Oh, Andrew. Cut. We got to take that again.
Whoa.
We got to take that again.
Elliot, start printing t-shirts.
So I've had this really good joke that I was going to make, Andrew.
Oh, good.
I kind of,
when the game came out,
you
turned your nose up at it.
Yeah. Oh, Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Elliot, start rolling again.
You stopped?
So I love Pinocchio.
Uh-huh.
My nose is growing.
No, that's not. Jesus, Elliot, stop. You know what? Take one might have been the best one. The goodest, Jesus.
The goodest?
The best one? What do you think, Elliot? Take one? You want to do it one more time.
One more time.
Okay, one more time.
Okay. Andrew.
So do you remember the line?
I do remember the line.
Okay.
And I just got to say, this is why I love doing this podcast with you.
Oh, see, why? Your nose grew. Come on.
What? Oh, shit.
Aw, dude.
I'll just keep the first
Yeah, I'll just keep the first one. Don't use the last one.
It's a Pinocchio... It's a Pinocchio Bloodborne. No, there are a lot of Italian accents in this. A lot of Italian accents in this.
Italians and Irish, the two cultures we can still openly insult and do accents.
Thank God we have one, too.
Thank God.
We need them.
Love it.
But it's a game, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about it because I feel like it's way past its life cycle for that.
Yeah.
But I do want to just kind of give this open apology and say that I did look past the game. Mm-hmm. I kind of openly have been saying that I'm done with Souls likes because why wouldn't I just play Dark Souls or Bloodborne?
Is that what it is?
A Souls like, that's what they call it.
No, but that's what Lies of P is?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it has a pretty engaging combat system. It's you as Pinocchio, which is kind of puppet / human, versus a bunch of puppets that have risen up. There's this puppet uprising, and they've just smushed all the humans.
Oh no.
There are dead humans everywhere in boxes, heads on the ground.
One guy on the internet was like, I swear to God, guys, we cannot build this many puppets. The uprising will come and it'll smoosh us all. And then these people are like, shut up, Gary. You're such an idiot. And then he's just running through the street like, I told you.
First it was the climate's going to smoosh us. Now it's the puppets are going to smoosh us.
Gary's always recommending things that smoosh us. Oh,
remember when Koosh came out?
So wait, you like this game?
I do like this game. It has a combat system that is reminiscent of, it's kind of like Bloodborne with Sekiro a little bit, where there's a good parry mechanic. Bloodborne did this thing where every time you get hit, it kind of shows how much health you're going to lose, but gives you some time to get that health back by attacking the other enemy. So there's like a life gain. It rewards you being aggressive in the face of danger, which in my day-to-day life, so this works really well for me. And there's also a parry mechanic that's kind of similar to Sekiro. The atmosphere is very good. The setting is dark and gothic, which works for me. The one thing I don't love is the enemy design, because they're kind of like puppets that are malfunctioning.
Yeah.
They're very herky-jerky, and you have to base your deflects. It's like very timing specific.
Okay.
So they purposely try to throw you off with like weird delays and jerky moves so you don't know when their attacks are coming. But unlike a FromSoft game like Elden Ring or something like that, where there's an anthropomorphic thing that I can kind of like justify, his arm is going to like swing in a certain way and then I know when to attack. This puppet will like swing and then like fall down and like hit you with a back elbow, and I'm like, I don't know, I can't register when to block this one unless I'm just...
It's like Anderson Silva.
It is like Anderson Silva.
Strikes from out of nowhere.
And then he kicked me and his leg broke.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was wild.
That probably does happen in the game. Puppet's leg breaking?
Actually, you can break Puppet's weapons by deflecting. That's a really cool mechanic.
Like
so
that.
if you're in a long fight with someone, you keep having these perfect parries, their weapon might break, and that's a really cool mechanic. All in all, I think it's on Game Pass, so that's why I got it. I was just kind of in between games. I couldn't think of anything to play, and I'm like, I know enough people who have recommended it as something that I should check out, and I finally did, and lo and behold, it's perfectly enjoyable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. Color me wrong on that one, I guess.
Well, color me wrong, Andrew. I had my nose turned up at this game the whole freaking time.
Your nose turned up?
Yeah.
Wow. Just Pinocchio. His nose is kind of a famous appendage of his.
Andrew, you and people with noses, you're just always commenting on people's like culture's noses.
Oh my God.
No, you're always saying, it's just like, it's old. Like we're 6 years into this podcast.
Yeah.
Let the bit go.
Yeah, you're right. That bit that I keep doing needs to probably retire.
That's the thing is I'm calling it a bit to cover for you.
Yeah.
But
most people just call it a slur, I guess, or something like that.
That's what their fans are saying.
The fans are saying. Yes,
oh my God. The fans of you. They're an interesting group. Frankly, I don't think he says it enough.
Don't you dare turn this around on me. We know all our young male maniacs are fans of you. The bad boy of podcasting.
The bad boy of podcasting.
You gonna miss them?
The fans?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I interact with our listeners all the time.
I'm not.
You're not going to miss them?
No, I'm good.
And why? Is that because of their noses?
No. I don't care if they have noses or not.
Oh. You would cut them off, you're saying?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yum, yum, yum. I love delicious noses.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, we're going to do top 10 video games of all time.
Let's do the top 10 video games of all time, Andrew, before we get into our actual list, because we'll go back and forth.
We have so much to talk about
We need to lay the groundwork as best as possible. Like, what is the top 10?
The almost uninteresting part is the actual list. I am more curious. The construction of this list.
Yes.
I had an easier, Sophie had it easy with her choice. This was the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life.
Okay, so how did you decide on what games made the list?
So my gut instinct was to just start writing down games in no particular order.
That makes sense.
In a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
A spreadsheet, it was a Google spreadsheet because you can easily drag and drop things and replace the order of them. So I knew I was going to be doing a lot of that. So I just wrote down games and I got to about 50 before I started to even think about like purposely trying to pick out different games from my childhood or from the last few years that I've played. It was just first come, first serve.
Yep.
Getting them all on the list was one thing. Getting them into some sort of rough order based on instinct and instinct alone was step two. And then I really had to come to terms with where to put a game on the list that meant a lot to me as a kid versus a game that means a lot to me now. Recency bias is a very real thing in the game industry, but also plays a part because games keep getting better mechanically, graphically, accessibility, all this stuff. Games are actually getting better. Unlike arguably movies and books and stuff where the medium, you can look back, the 90s were a better time for movies than right now. More good movies came out in the 90s than are coming out nowadays. Books, probably the same thing. I don't know. But video games, the best games are kind of coming out like within the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So here are kind of my considerations. I had to give some leeway to how a game felt at the time as opposed to could I play it now? So there was consideration for that. However, more consideration was given to a game if it was still playable today, if it's still something that I can go back and play, and not so much leeway was given to a retro feel, like the retro feeling games, simply because everything in my life felt better back then. So if a game was like, oh my God, I felt so much joy playing this game. It's like, sure, I don't experience joy anymore. So like I couldn't, doesn't matter how good the game is.
This whole thing has been so revealing.
What about you? What were some of the points that you have to consider?
Well, after speaking to my therapist, I came out with the top 10 video games of all time. Yeah, it's two things. It's games that I have acknowledged at the time where I'm like, this is one of the best games of all time.
Yes.
Versus games that I've put the most amount of time into.
That's a good one.
There is something to be said that there's going to be games on my list that you'll be like, that's not one of the best games of all time. I'm like, then why did I put 200 hours into it?
I consider that a lot. Yeah.
So like there are games that I've come back to throughout my life, no matter what, how old it is. And I keep going back to play it. And I'll get into a few that like spent money to try and like, please let me play this game again. Yep. That has to be part of the game because to me, that was one of the best games of all time. We say this every week when we do lists. These are completely subjective to us.
Yes.
This, more than any other list we've ever done, these are not the 10 best games of all time. These are my 10 best games of all time, and ones that I'll continue to play or I have memories of that I literally, there's a few on here that I've finished a game and went, well, I think that's one of the best games of all time.
Yeah.
And that will be on there. Will I ever play it again? Maybe not.
I don't think that matters.
I don't think so either. But acknowledging games that I have played many, 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 many times over and over again matters.
That's, more than any medium, I think things are good for different reasons.
Yes.
Like there can be a game with no story, but the mechanics are brilliant.
Yes.
And I'm like, does that make it one of the best games of all time versus a game that has no mechanics, but one of the best story? Like very different things to consider. And I really did struggle with it quite a bit. The number of hours you put into it did come into play for me as well. There were certain types of games that I considered putting on here or not putting on here just because I don't want to say too much without ruining it, but I'm sure you'll have a couple picks that I will then be able to say, hey, this is why I also have it on my list or do not have it on my list. And that'll kind of bring it up before we spoil the entire list just in this kind of preamble.
Totally. How many games do you think we are going to share on our list?
Good question. I
have 3 in my head.
I think,
without actually thinking of the titles, I just generally think 3.
I think,
excuse me.
I think maybe 4.
Okay. Interesting.
I am looking at the titles and I think maybe 4.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So as always, when we have one that's on both of our lists, we'll wait for the person with the higher number on the list, meaning better.
Yes.
Meaning closer to 1.
Closer to 1.
We always have struggled with the higher thing. And then we'll wait for that.
One quick question before we get into it. And feel free to not answer this one if it reveals too much. But what's your underwear look like? Andrew's covering the mic.
He's no comment.
Okay, we got to get these lawyers out of here, Andrew. They're really...
I disagree.
Oh, you do? Did your lawyer just say that?
No, you did not.
If you're not speaking, you don't have to cover the mic. He just covered the mic again. He's doing it again. He's squinting. How far away is that lawyer? Is he holding up signs for you? Okay, Andrew's got his binoculars out. He's staring at that. I can't even see the lawyer from where I'm at.
There's a cardinal over there.
Oh, okay. He's talking to a cardinal.
Obviously a member of the church.
There's a bishop right next to him.
There's a member of a church. That's who I respect most in my life, that I listen to advice on.
Hey, who has better lawyers than the church?
He keeps telling me to lie and hide information. I don't know. Is that important around here?
He says he's going to move you to another podcast in spite of all the bad things you've done.
Were you ever aware of a presence called the Bad Boy of Podcasting? Like, I need to leave. This podcast is over. I need to leave.
So you spent 6 years with him and you knew?
Oh, crap. This is what I get for starting a podcast with Mark Ruffalo. So what was your question?
Okay. The actual question I had was, if there is because franchises, there are a lot of really big franchises out there.
Oh, yes.
Did you give any consideration for the best of a franchise in order to only be represented once? Is that kind of how you did it?
I don't have multiples of franchises on the list.
Same with me.
I thought that would be not cheating, but I just thought it would kind of rob some of the joy of being able to name a new thing on there. I think you could think of maybe some franchises I'm about to name that were kind of hard ones. Now, I will say I don't have any sports franchises on mine.
Okay, that was going to be so I considered it heavily putting in NHL because apart from a game that is on my list, the franchise that I've spent the most time with in my life is NHL. And I'm like, I kind of am obligated to put this on the list, but
my thing was, which one do I choose and where do I put it? And then because, I'll talk about when we get to the runners up because I've included my favorites of those iterations.
Yes.
But I couldn't do it because if I just said something like Madden, and I said, I probably put more time into Madden than any other franchise in my video game life. But there have been series that have been really bad. And there have been ones that are really good. It's almost unfair to put it on there just as like a blanket to beat one of these other good installations.
That's a good point. Yeah. And then even not even just the franchise thing, whether you're dealing with, the best of Madden or the best of another major franchise that's out there that you only represent once on your list. Because it's my list and it's not based on like review scores or anything, I almost had this element of like Desert Island to it where I didn't want to have too many games that were too similar. So there were styles of games that I had represented by the best of them and then almost have like the rest linked to it as runners up. Andrew gave me a little waggle there. Yeah.
Yes. And I also will say this podcast has informed a lot of my choices negatively because There would have been games that if I'd never done this podcast, if this was the first episode, you said, what are your 10 best games of all time? I would have included some other games in there, but since we've gone back and played some, I didn't include it because I was like, well, I know that's not true anymore.
That's interesting. So that goes back to my whole thing of like, is it still playable now?
Yeah. And we'll get to one. I wonder.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
I've brought it up, I think, a couple of times. This is the funniest part. This almost feels like a summary to the podcast.
Yeah.
Being like, if you've done all the homework and listened to all 649 episodes, you'll know what our answers are probably going to be.
You'll be able to predict a few of them.
Yeah. Definitely.
Maybe some surprises, but
that's like rewarding people's hard work.
100%.
Yes.
Like our listeners that went and counted how many times we brought up horses on the podcast. Yeah, that was the hardest work we've ever seen.
Okay, at the end of the month, we're going to have a small section about horses.
I think we have to. Yeah. I think we have
and
to.
And then, play some drops. Okay, Mikey, do you want to begin?
Sure.
Number 10?
Number 10. This is one, I don't know if you're going to expect me to have this on my list, but it's a game that took me a very long time to beat. I had it circled in my back catalog for a very long time, but once I played through it, and finished it, I have never stopped thinking about this game. I listen to the soundtrack all the time.
Okay.
I bring it up in day-to-day conversations and attempt to get people interested in it, and they never are. Yeah. But it's Disco Elysium.
Oh, okay.
As my 10th favorite game of all time, or arguably the 10th best game of all time. It was a tough selection, but the most highbrow game I've ever played and enjoyed. It kind of allowed me to enjoy the mechanics of a game that I don't normally enjoy, specifically because the story was unbelievable. It gave me one of my favorite moments in video games, and I think a lot of the games on my list have like one moment that just really stood out to me as like one of my favorite moments in any medium. And Disco Elysium had one. I don't want to spoil what it is, but it comes towards the end of the game. But yeah, it's something that I try to read. I'm reading a book right now based on the fact that it's recommended because it's similar to the writing style of Disco Elysium. My computer wallpaper is Disco Elysium. I'm obsessed with it, and I'm 6 months removed from having finished it. So there you go.
There you go. Disco Elysium. I was wondering if this was going to be on your list.
Yeah.
That's great. I don't know.
Because you never ended up finishing it, right?
I know.
See, but I struggled with it the same way.
I gotta do it. I have a flight coming up.
Yeah.
Maybe just put some time into that old Switch.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so funny. What podcast is that? I think it's Get Played. And Disco Elysium is one of their favorite.
I think Heather Ann Campbell.
Favorite game of all time.
Yeah.
So it making an appearance here is an absolutely warranted thing. And I know you won't stop talking about it.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's the kind of game that I think people who aren't into video games could get into.
Yes.
Or my instinct is that because I'm like, well, it's barely even a game, but the mechanics of the game are actually incredibly complex. They're so complex that's one of the reasons I bounced off of it. There are like 24 different stats that you could put things into. And it wasn't until like a quarter of the way through the game that I realized that I could even like how they interacted with my conversations or when I got like one of my like intuitions speaking to me, it was doing that because I'd put points into intuition. It wasn't because like, otherwise it could have been like my strength talking to me or something like that. So we should kind of, I guess, say Disco Elysium is a detective game based in some alternate reality, non-Earth, with a whole different history, a little bit sci-fi. You're there in this place called Revachol investigating a murder with, and you're a cop that has completely lost his memory of who he is, which lends itself well to the idea of role playing and building out a character that you are. It's the kind of game, and a lot of games do this, where they make it feel like no matter what you do, you're failing. Yeah. And that's an uncomfortable place to be in a game. It reminds me of like the old Walking Dead, the Telltale games. And this does that a lot as well, but it's all about the conversations that you have. The lore of the world that it builds is so well fleshed out. There's like a million lines of dialogue. I think I mean that literally in this game. It's all voice acted now. So highly recommended if you haven't played it and you have the patience for like a tabletop style game, CRPG or whatever they call them. It was a brilliant game.
See, that's awesome. Yeah, I guess we should describe the game first.
Yeah,
just talk about it with our history. Yeah, it's good to know that you're saying you're supposed to feel like you're failing, because I honestly felt like am I not doing this right?
No, it took me a long time to get used to that, and then it kind of works as because your role playing is a failure. Like the guy you're playing as is not a good person. Yeah. Maybe trying his best, but has clearly failed at a lot of things. So it puts you in the mindset of like, I don't know, like the divorced dad that can't help but disappoint his kids sort of thing. Like that character that you see in movies all the time. And I like role playing as someone who's disappointed other people because then it doesn't feel like I myself am doing it for once. Yeah.
But you're controlling that character, so there's like a weird snake eating his tail.
You know what? Maybe there is a way to play the game right, and I just don't know how to do it.
All right, number 10 for Mikey's Disco Elysium. My number 10, it's so funny that like the list at the end of honorable mentions, we could go on for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I had this on the honorable mentions for so long, and I looked at it forever, and I just went, who are you lying to yourself? Like, who do you think you are here? If this podcast has been anything, it has been framed by me playing one game almost the whole time.
Oh my God.
And I have to include it on there. Fortnite.
Oh, wow. Oh, for a second, I thought you were going to say another game, which I'm sure is
Star Wars Outlaws. I have to include Fortnite. I just would be kidding myself if any game had attracted me this much or this much time or brought me back so many times, and it's only one iteration. Now that's a cheat. Like that's a lie. It's not one iteration of one game. It's been a game that's evolved over and over again. This is a game that's a battle royale where 100 people drop off of
I was going to say, explain Fortnite for those who don't understand.
You know what? I should, because there are some people that probably just never got into it and go, so what
is
do you
this
do?
about?
This is like when people are like, Roblox is really popular. I'm like, and then I have no idea what that is.
I just learned what Roblox is because my brother is his partner has a daughter.
Yes.
And she plays Roblox all the time. And I did the thing when we were, they were all up at the cottage this past weekend. And I did the thing where her mom was like, thank you so much for showing an interest in what she was. I sat down and I was like, so what are you playing? What is this? How does this go? And she was like, you're so good with kids. I'm like, shut up. I'm fascinated.
I've pre-ordered it. It's going to be arriving in my house. Yeah. I do the same thing because my player one, her godson a couple of years ago was telling me about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And he's like, whatever. That was after just beating him in Fortnite where he cried.
Fuck yeah.
Love making kids cry. Gotta learn one way or another.
Life's not easy. We don't experience joy anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
He threatened to report me on the Epic servers. It was the most maniacal thing I've ever had happen. He looked at me and goes, if you beat me again, I'm going to report you and you won't have your account. And I'm like, what the hell is that? It's like he had this planned. Fortnite, you drop off of a bus is floating, the battle bus, and it's 100 people drop onto an island that is constantly evolving season to season, and with different characters, and you can customize what you look like. You can pick up, you start gunless, and you can pick up whatever weapon you want, health and interactable environmental things, and the last person standing wins. That sounds really simple, but inside of it, there is so many little missions and quests and things that right now it's Dr. Doom themed island.
Cool.
Which is really fun.
Robert Downey Jr. themed?
I don't think it's unrelated. And so there's like Doom bots that are like around that are NPCs that are trying to kill you. And it's just, you can pick up Captain America's shield, which is so cool.
Oh, that's cool.
So this game is constantly evolving, keeps your attention, and they've been really smart to keep branching out into different things. They're doing concerts, they're doing races, they're doing Guitar Hero type things. And I've just been constantly amazed as a company and branding experiment. And on top of that, it is a fun game to play. And I know many people my age that are still playing this game, which blows my mind. So I have to, after 7 years of playing this game, I have to include it on here.
I'm glad you did, because it needs representation. And to be honest, you talk about how it was just kind of like a thread that's been drawn throughout your entire time on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm glad of that, because someone has to represent it. It's one of the biggest games in the world, if not the biggest game in the world.
Yes.
I have never played Fortnite. I know we talked about doing that, and maybe that's something we can come back and do on the channel at a later date. But
or next week.
Or next week. Who knows? Yeah.
Who knows? We'll see.
But no, it's exciting to know that it's still getting played, that it's still out there. I love that it exists, because it seems like it does the right thing with IP and with the power that it has. It's evolving in a way that is respectful of the player base, as opposed to just knowing they're going to be there. And
yes, I would say so, because their transition into microtransactions is purely aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which is something that is very different than the way that this game, it's a free game. That's the thing we keep talking about.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind that this game has become, one of the more successful games of all time. Disney now bought part of it, like 20% for like $2.5 billion.
Crazy.
Like, it's just insane. And I will say, I agree with you. They could have turned the knife so many times.
Yeah.
And even with Disney ownership, I was waiting for it to happen, and it didn't. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So Fortnite has to be on there. A game that I've played so much, and so number 10 for me, Fortnite.
Amazing. Yeah, $2.5 billion, and they know that's pretty much just like a tab that they're running for advertisement for all of their properties. Now they're just like, hey, we got a new movie coming out. Rather than running $1 billion worth of ads on bus shelters, let's just put Dr. Doom into Fortnite.
I'm so excited to see how far they stretch this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, Lion King, the prequel's out. I'm like, I can't wait to be Mufasa running around with a handgun.
Pride Rock is going to be a place that you can get to.
And then there'll be because they've done this in the past. There's wild animals that can like help you or hurt you.
Amazing.
And I bet you that's gonna be part of it.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love it.
There's a stampede. Timon and Pumbaa with a machine gun.
Similar to Hakuna Matata. Similar to your Fortnite choice is fucking my number 9 is the previously 6-on-6 MOBA style shooter, now 5-on-5, now free to play, now not worth playing, but still my number 9, Overwatch.
I am so happy you have this on this, because I would say even more than Fortnite, Mikey's obsession with Fortnite is
Overwatch.
The thing. Oh, fuck me. Sorry. I'm just in the background just working on Fortnite right now. Don't worry. Your obsession
You're like Queen's Gambiting.
yeah. Like, oh, that's what I should have done. I'll say I don't know where. Your obsession with Overwatch really was one of the things. It was at its peak as we started the podcast. And so it was something we talked about every week for years.
Yes.
Every week we talked about Overwatch. And so I'm so happy it's on there, because I was going to call you out if you're like, honorable mention Overwatch. I'm like, Mikey.
No.
Mikey.
It was one of the ones where when I wrote down that big list of like 50 games to start, it was one of the first things I wrote, and I never took it out of the top 10 spot because I knew it had to be on there somewhere. I've got a tattoo. I don't know if I can show it on the screen.
There you go.
It's Anna's aiming reticle, if you can see that over there.
Which is also her helmet, right?
No. Oh, it kind of looks like her hood a little bit, but it's like when she zooms in, there's like the little aiming. Yeah. A game that I think is, what can I say? It consumed years of my life.
Yes.
I still think about going back and playing it every now and again, but I know that if I do, I'm going to become consumed by it. I'm almost happy that it's passed me by with the launch of new characters and a whole new play style, essentially with the introduction of those characters, that it feels a little bit like I wouldn't be able to get back into it, but it's one of the funnest overall games that I've ever played. Just in terms of mechanics and what I enjoy controlling, it's hard for me to play first-person shooters that aren't Overwatch now, because that one just fucking nailed it. If I got bored of playing Ana, I could play as a giant monkey in Winston, and it's essentially like I was playing a different video game. Yeah. Regardless of how, and I say this with love, I guess, how far Overwatch has fallen, it was remarkable what the game did. Every company wanted to create a 5-on-5 or 6v6 shooter.
Yes.
Concord, I think Sony's game just got removed from the Sony store. It was like a massive failure. Anthem didn't work. There's a bunch of them. There's Deadlock, which is being made by Valve right now, so it's still in the zeitgeist, but Overwatch was incredible. No game has consumed me outside of the game itself as much as Overwatch either. On my lunch break at work every day, I would just watch streamers play Overwatch. Like all I wanted to do was play Overwatch and watch people play Overwatch. It's the most I've ever been addicted to a game, so it has to be on my top 10.
Oh no, I'm so glad it's on there. Yeah. Even more than mechanics, I played a lot of this game too. I don't think nearly to the level or skill of you, but is that the strategy was also a lot of fun.
Yes.
I loved that you had different classes, and this was back in the day where you could choose anything you wanted to. Now you have to fit into categories.
Right. You could choose a team of 6 DPS and no healers.
Exactly.
Like
which, it happened a lot. And now it has to be 1 tank and 2 DPS and 2 healing. And I love that strategy of like, okay, this isn't working. Do you guys want to mix this up? And like that feeling of teamwork inside of with strangers is so much fun.
With strangers, or it was the only game where that I've ever played where I had a consistent group of people I would log in with, and we would all play our roles like as though we were a team. And that was so enjoyable. I remember staying in some Friday and Saturday nights, and the people I were playing with, I was probably, like 27 at the time, and they were probably like 18 or something like that. But we were just having a fucking blast. It was just a great time. And you're right, the strategy is the reason I got into it. I'm not great at first-person shooters. I'm not great at competitive games, but the fact that I could kind of sit back and strategize and try to use leadership as opposed to Twitch mechanics to win a game was brilliant. And I miss those days, but I'm not unhappy to be on the other side of it because now I have time for other games.
I would say too that like you'd say you're afraid you'd go back and get right back in. I don't think you would. I think it's changed. This is one of our favorite things we always talk about. Robert Frost.
You can never go home again.
You can never go home again.
No,
because it's changed, and it'll bother you the small ways.
I think so.
And like it's kind of like
what do you mean Ana's not meta anymore?
Yeah. Like a game we're probably going to talk about later, but like it's when we love Pokemon and the original 150.
Yeah,
and they do 154, and you're like, what the fuck is that shit?
Yeah.
Bullshit. Get out of here. That's the same thing. I bet you when you're going to introduce to like new character that's, I don't know, a tree or something.
Yeah,
like that. You're
gonna be
like,
fucking like
what
trees,
the fuck?
dude.
This is so stupid.
Oh, my Greta Thunberg.
Yeah. I'm here for people and that monkey and that hamster. There's a few other ones, but you get it. You know what I mean? Trees are stupid.
A rat. I'm not a rat. It's a junk rat, whatever.
Yeah, okay, whatever. So you're Australian?
Oh, you couldn't tell?
Oh, yeah. You didn't drop enough C-bombs. My number 9.
Yeah.
Is this the oldest game on the list? No, it's not. But it feels like the oldest because it's not a graphical technology wizard or anything like that. But it's a mechanic and it's also a style of game that has essentially died in front of me. Holding it in my arms.
No!
SimCity 2000.
Oh, wow. I do not have this on my list.
I didn't imagine you would.
Yeah.
But it's a world beater. SimCity, everyone knows what this is. It was the precursor to The Sims, which you can't believe is an actual thing. The Sims may be the most successful, one of the top 5 most successful video game franchises of all time. And it was just all about city building. And there are many games that we could be talking about that does this eventually, but 2000 is the best distillation of this because you could build an area. Yeah. One city, maybe 2 or 3 cities, all in areas that could help trade each other water and electricity, maybe share garbage disposal, things like that. But as the game expanded and tried to get nicer and the graphics got better and cleaner and you could build worlds and all this kind of stuff, too much.
Yeah.
This was the best version of it. Yeah. And it is something that is absolutely my comfort thing. I don't understand ASMR. But this is my ASMR.
Cozy gaming.
It is cozy gaming. When I don't feel like I feel uncomfortable, I'm like, I'm just gonna build a little world. I'm just gonna be a little rat in a hole and build
and
a
no
little
one's
world.
Gonna call me a loser in this world.
Blanket over my head, and I'm just building a little world.
Everyone's gonna want to be my friend.
This is Utopia, and I'm the mayor of the city. And I can't tell you how much joy it brings me to work on the piping of the city to make sure that the industrial area gets enough bus stops because that's the way things work. You know what I mean? To tax the rich. There's all these little things that you get to enforce onto the city or try different experiments, and you get to see it actually succeed or fail right in front of you. Yeah. And there's something very fun about that idea that I think is true in just all video games. In this, it's a newer or unique version of that, and I really enjoy that control. I just think it's partially realistic and partial fantasy that combines in a way that just really makes me happy.
My favorite thing about you bringing this one up, specifically SimCity 2000, is the fact that, you know, when we started this podcast, I think you and I both kind of thought like, you know, retro games, like we're not really going to enjoy them when we go back and play them. And it took us a while to like relearn the vocabulary of playing retro games. But in that process, what I learned was that some franchises peaked at a certain level of simplicity. Yes. And the more complicated it got, the less in I was, either because my favorite version of the game was a simpler version, or because the formula is just not as good when it's diluted with modern mechanics. Yep. So placing some of our favorite games at specific eras, not simply because they were, you know, that's how much I enjoyed it when I was a child, but more because that was actually the best version of the game. That's like my favorite thing. Because I don't think, like, if you went back to play SimCity right now as a franchise, you would probably choose SimCity 2000. Because to you, and there's another game that I don't want to bring up just in case it's on one of our lists, but there are certain styles of games that just work better like that. And if I'm going to play a city building game, it's going to be SimCity 2000. Not even though City Skylines is like a more recent version.
I tried recently and I'm just like, it's not the thing that I like. And it's probably just as good for somebody else it might be, but you change a few things. That's why I believe Overwatch 2 won't work. But I completely agree with you. And doing this podcast, you're absolutely right. You learn a lot of things about the iteration that was the best. And you figure out why that is. But one of the things we've also figured out is why franchises die. And you start looking at the peak and then afterwards, like, oh, what changes did they do that messed up the formula that made it so successful? And this was just when it was at its peak. And it also just hit me at the perfect time too, that, you know, coming out in the late 90s, that this was like the perfect time where I could play a ton of video games, and I understood more about the world to help going like, oh, okay, wait, like incinerators are bad for the environment. Right. That would be bad to put that in a residential area. Got it.
Every time you did, fucking Greta flies one of her jets into Andrewtopia, and it's like, how dare you? How dare you?
Absolutely. And like, she wasn't even born yet, so this was like a thing I created in my head.
Well, SimCity 2000.
Yeah, but then when I saw her in real life, I'm like, wait, is this a world that I created?
Are we in Androtopia right now?
Oh, crap.
And someone's like, shut up, loser. And you're like, this isn't Androtopia.
No, if this is Androtopia, I have failed. This is the worst version of my life, I think, of all the many options I could have had. So yeah, SimCity 2000 for number 9 for me.
SimCity 2000 for number 9. My number 8 is maybe the newest feeling AAA game that I've ever played. And by that, I mean a game that came out somewhat recently and felt unlike anything that I've ever played while still being a AAA game.
Okay.
A game that, similar to Disco Elysium, I bounced the fuck off of after I played it the first time, and for some reason decided to go back to it and played the fuck out of Death Stranding.
Okay.
Death Stranding is a Stranding style game. It tried to coin the moniker of that, where it's sort of asynchronous multiplayer where you can kind of help out people in the world. You're essentially a courier in a post-apocalyptic world where your goal is to build strands and reestablish a network that brings the United States back online. You go from place to place in an incredibly hostile landscape. And if it sounds like I'm doing the game a disservice or trying not to explain the extent of the game, that's not true. You're delivering shit. That's what you do in this game.
Mikey, that is the clearest description I've ever heard of this game. I'm like, oh yeah, a network. That makes sense.
Bringing the chiral network back online.
See, I could have just been like, you're a guy in a moon suit. Goo people are trying to get you. There is a baby, parentheses, question mark, and parentheses.
Which essentially is also a better description of the game. It's
also,
Hideo Kojima.
Guillermo del Toro and Conan O'Brien, plus an AMC show about motorcycles. The end. Monster Energy.
Have you ever pissed on a goo monster? Well, now you can. It's absurd. And I struggle with some of these games that are, and movies and TV shows that are this absurd, because you're always going to have the cynic who's like, that's just, you just like it because it's weird. And there's a lot of weird shit that I don't like because it's weird. Alan Wake 2, we talked about kind of missing the mark in that way.
Yeah.
But Death Stranding, through the direction of Hideo Kojima, is one of the most unique games from a story standpoint that I played. Like, he really just goes for it.
Boy, does
and
he.
Mechanically, I never expected to play a game where the purpose is pretty much to not fall down and walk across the United States. It's like the U.S. patriotic version of Terry Fox, and reestablish the network. And it is one of the most memorable games. The point in time that I really fell in love with this game, I remember you're kind of rebuilding roads, because every time you get somewhere, you can make it easier to get back by establishing like ladders and ropes to get you over mountains and across valleys and stuff like that. And I remember having a car on a road that I just finished building with a bunch of collectibles that I was going to drive back to the main hub to deliver to everyone. And it was going to be, the reward is essentially likes. So it really is feeding into this kind of like social media generation. Yep. It also, by the way, came out just before COVID hit and really predicted that kind of gig economy thumbs up thing that we do. And I remember knowing that all I had to do to get all those likes was drive this car along this road that I had spent hours building, and I was going to get this just dump of dopamine.
Endorphins.
And I remember just saying to no one in particular, in my condo alone, thank you for letting me play this game. I was so happy.
Jesus Christ.
I was so happy. It's one of the most unique games I've ever played. I know you didn't end up finishing it. I know a lot of people bounced off of it. I don't know if there's a game I'm more excited for than Death Stranding 2, because my number 8 greatest game of all time is Death Stranding 1.
I love it. Yeah, I so many things I want to talk about inside of that, but I agree with you. I think the people that bounce off of it like me and didn't finish it are one selection of people. But I don't think anyone that finished it was like, okay.
Yeah.
I think people that finished it were so in and loved it so much and hold it so dear, and I think that's awesome. I do love Kojima's just absolutely mad scientist thing of like, it's a game about standing up. And they're like, well, that's not very interesting. He goes, that is, I gotta tell you, the least interesting part of the game. And then just describes all the other elements, and their eyes are just like, whatever.
Have you ever wanted to get into a shower first person style with Guillermo del Toro?
One person's hand goes up. Oh, no, no, just me. Okay. All right. Yeah, it is really something. And the music also you should talk about too.
Soundtrack is amazing. Atmospherically, it's incredible. Patience as a mechanic in a game is really cool too. Enjoying the moment to moment experience of a game as opposed to the expectation of a climax in order to get your enjoyment is now something that, you know, even like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom do. Like Tears of the Kingdom borrows the same mechanic where it's like the mission is not to beat the dungeon, it's to get to the dungeon. That's the mission. The mission is what you're experiencing right now, and that's what Death Stranding did. The soundtrack was great because Hideo Kojima, kind of like Quentin Tarantino, is just a fan of media and consumes everything.
Yes.
So everything references.
Follow him on Letterboxd.
Oh,
it is the fucking funniest thing in the world. Where if he doesn't like it, it was like 3 stars. Like that's all he'll say.
Yeah.
But then he'll watch some like dog shit movie and he'll be like, this is like this captures the human spirit within a middle class story of like, and you're like,
amazing.
The fuck is this?
Amazing.
And he gets these things from these movies that like I don't know we're there, but he sees them and that helps and that explains his storytelling so much.
For sure.
And I just he's such he consumes things in such an interesting way.
Yeah. Can't wait for number 2. Number 8. And you said like people who have finished the game were totally in on it. It's because it's like an 80-hour game. Like if you're gonna
really,
if you want to put 80 hours into it, you have to be all in. And that's kind of how they get you.
Oh, that's interesting. It's almost like a story of Death Stranding itself. Okay, my number 8 is going to be. This is an interesting one. It's going to be Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh, that's your representation.
I know. This is going to be one of these ones where you're like, what? Like people are going to be very confused by this, but I am telling my own truth. And I'm telling you that I am one of the people that loved this game. I know this is not well regarded. We did this recently when we're ranking our franchises. And I think I've been thinking about it ever since. And I think I was lying to myself about how much I love this game. And I know this because I also, much like Fortnite, like a few billion people also like this game and still like this game, which is just fucking bananas. And I'm not one of those people. I don't play online. This is purely the story mode. This is single player mode. I love the innovations they take. I am still Rockstar pilled like crazy. The driving and the shooting that are both their own. That's the way I can do that. They are proprietary to Rockstar.
I think the driving is good. The shooting is bad. I like the driving in Rockstar.
Nonetheless, they have created a style of how to control a car, a motorcycle, maybe even a horse, that is completely unique to their own. And you're right. When you play other shooting games, you're like, oh, the Rockstar one sucks. And you play other driving games, you go, you know, they're onto something. But when I was talking about the speeder earlier with Star Wars Outlaws, the whole time I go, God damn it, why can't it be more like Rockstar?
For sure.
And you just sit there and start doing this. The amount of cars that they can do, the character switching, and I think this is the biggest encapsulation of what Grand Theft Auto is supposed to be. This loud, exaggerated America that is screaming at you at every opportunity about the inequalities and deficiencies within society and the people that go, I don't care, I'm going to succeed. And I think it's just such an interesting way of doing this. The invention of Trevor especially versus Michael. Michael was always going to be a character in Grand Theft Auto. That's how characters go in Grand Theft Auto. Of a guy that's like, I'm going to do pretty well and I'm going to make my way to the top. That's every Grand Theft Auto character ever. Except they fast forwarded this guy and all of a sudden he's really rich already. And you're like, oh, that's really interesting. Except you have Trevor, who never would have been a character in that thing. And then you have Franklin too, which I find to be the least interesting character. But what are you gonna do? I think this game is really like the final note to a Grand Theft Auto saga. And when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out in 2030, I can't wait to have an episode about this because I feel it'll be a new chapter in the Grand Theft Auto games. I think they're going to be doing something that sounds like a little bit different, and
they have to.
And I think that's awesome. That's really great. And if the crescendo and the send off is something like number 5, I love it. So.
Do you think you'll like, I know this is like such a, almost not worth asking because who the fuck knows, but do you think you'll like Grand Theft Auto 6 more than 5? Do you think there's a world in which that's possible?
I probably, yes. It has to be, the answer has to be yes, because otherwise, I probably have felt this way many times. I loved San Andreas. I loved Vice City. I loved number 4. I loved all these games. And you probably have ended them and go like, doesn't get much better than that. And then you go, and it does, but it's just different enough. That it challenges you in a different way. And that's the part I like. 5 is not like 4. And 4 is not like 3. So I like very much those big differences between the two. Actually, 2 and 3 are all Vice City and number 3.
3 Vice City, San Andreas.
3 Vice City and San Andreas.
And then 4 was its own thing.
4 and then 5 is its own thing. San Andreas and Vice City are actually almost the most similar because of the story they're telling is a hyper genre specific thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
I think 5 is so different than 4. It's crazy. And I hope that 6 does the same thing.
Yeah, I think it will. And I don't think you're wrong at all in selecting 5 as the best of the franchise. Like you said, apart from just sales itself, the tale that this game has had and the story that it told, kind of that Heat style story to it, the multiple characters, the city itself is as large as San Andreas, probably larger, but the ways in which you can get around are more entertaining. Number 5 is a fantastic game. It's not my favorite, but I think, if you're looking at the franchise, it would be hard to argue that it isn't almost objectively the best, but I know you and I insert our own subjectivity into it a lot, which is why when we did our franchise breakdown, it wasn't, what was it? Number 4 was the best, I think we ended up with?
We said number 4.
Yeah.
Which, you know what, and that, I'm not here to argue that, it was just more of the impression of I'm number 5, I'll have memories in that game that I'll always think about probably.
Yeah, that's great.
So, number 5 for my 8th best game of all time. What's your 7th best?
My 7th best game is a game that also comes up on this podcast quite a bit. It's the most I've ever felt for characters in a video game. It's part of a trilogy, but it's going to represent the highest peak that I had in this trilogy. The trilogy being Mass Effect, the original trilogy, this game being Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is my favorite in the franchise, just from a gameplay standpoint. The game that really sold the franchise on me. Those character interactions and the love that I had for the characters hit hardest in number 3 because it was 3 games in the making, 90 hours worth of gameplay, 10 years of time that has passed. But number 3 wouldn't have hit if number 2 hadn't set up my relationships with all these characters, which built on the relationships that I had in number 1. So I'm gonna settle on number 2. Mass Effect as a trilogy, the original is kind of a space opera. It was a BioWare game back when BioWare was kind of at its peak. Making these decision-based games. You can play as a Paragon, I think, which was the evil one, or a good guy, which was the good one, going all the way across the universe, trying to save the universe from Reapers in the very, very distant future. Kind of a tactical based shooter game, but what was good about the game wasn't necessarily the gameplay, although I thought that the gameplay was fantastic. It was more about the story that you made, your Commander Shepard. Who was he or who was she? What relationships did they have with the different aliens? Who did they kill? Who did they keep in their party? It just ended up telling a beat by beat story that was very different based on how you played it. Arguments obviously go to whether or not they stuck the landing with rewarding a variety of play styles at the very end, boiling it down to just 3 different endings that you can get. But I've always kind of shied away from the argument of that being a failure, because for me, the story itself of interacting with X character instead of Y character at Z time, like that was what was interesting to me, not necessarily the final cutscene that you got in the video game. It wasn't about that.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I think that would be everyone's natural next conversation, going like, well, what do you think about the ending?
Yeah.
I am so tired of this. I do this with finales all the time, of like series finales for TV shows. And people are like, well, was it good? I'm like the idea that like Lost season series finale is bad, so therefore the show is bad. It's like, I think it's just so stupid. Yeah. And it's like, the point is not like, you weren't playing Mass Effect 2 going like, can't wait to get to the end.
Yes.
Oh man, this end is going to be so fun.
I was sad when Mass Effect 2 ended.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you bring that up. And this is something you've brought up all the time, because you bring up specifically relationships you've had with other characters and how that made you feel. And that's like beautiful about video games, because it's so different than movies. Movies and TV make you feel something. Books make you feel something. But this is something where you act a character, and especially in Mass Effect, where you make choices that contribute negatively or positively to these relationships. It makes you feel something.
It really did. And I tell this story all the time, but when I was saying goodbye to Garrus, who was like my best friend in the game, a guy who I like... Of course, people are going to make fun of me for this, but who I had known for 9 years of my life in some form or another, and I had shared a lot of experiences with, when I had to say goodbye to him, and we're basically saying like, I'll save you a spot at the bar I'm at in heaven or hell or the afterlife, whatever it is, and I'll see you there. I was like choking up. Like they did all the fan service necessary to make it so that the ways in which you say goodbye in the game felt like momentous and meaningful. I think as far as these styles of games go, where you create a character and interact with the world around you, I know Baldur's Gate is one that a lot of people absolutely love nowadays, but Mass Effect was my version of that. It never got better.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you have that on there. So that's your number 7?
That's my number 7.
Yeah. Man, Baldur's Gate. That game scares the absolute piss out of me. If I ever start, you just might never hear from me again.
I've started 4 times and you're still hearing from me. I'm really trying to get into it, but it's hard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm bouncing off of it. It's just not a play style that I love. I keep every so often I boot it back up and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know enough to even say anything. My number 7.
Yes.
I wonder if this is going to be somewhere on your list. Mm-hmm. Pokemon Yellow.
It is
yellow,
not yellow, but
that's
yes,
okay. We can discuss that later then. Okay, so I'm going to skip my number 7. And let's go to your number 6. Then.
My number 6. I wonder if it's going to be on your list. My number 6. Metal Gear Solid.
No,
it isn't.
No.
Metal Gear Solid, and I'm talking about tactical espionage action. I'm talking about the PlayStation version. It was the first time I realized what story could be in games and how it could be represented. I spent as much time watching this game as I did playing it, and as much time thinking about it as I did watching it. When I wasn't playing the game, I was thinking about Metal Gear Solid. You and I played through the majority of this game together, whether I was playing or you were playing.
When we were little baby boys.
We were little baby boys, and we had to wait pretty much to like weekends when we would have time together. So during the week, I'd be like, we went through that hallway and there was that ninja guy and I can't wait to see wait to see what happens. And the story that sucked me in, Meryl, you talk about relationships in video games. Meryl was one of the premier for me, branching storylines, whether you save her or whether she dies. Metal Gear Solid, if you're not familiar, is kind of a tactical stealth-based third-person stealth-based game with another Hideo Kojima game. So this is his second representation on my top 10, but a game that came out at a time that I think video games needed to take that lean into maturity, and not just maturity as in like blood and guts, but maturity as in very well written stories and trusting that the game players would be able to follow along as best as they could while imbuing a ton of creativity in the enemy design and the puzzle solving and the feeling of stealth mechanics done perfectly. It was a brilliant game, a brilliant game.
Yeah, this is my number 11. Like this is the closest cut off. I completely agree with you that this is the first time a story in a video game was like, oh God, this actually like affected me.
Yeah.
It's not just like, I want to kill everyone or I want to get to the end or I want to win. It was like how it made you feel along the way. And there's so many like things that Metal Gear Solid did for video games that are so like iconic and they're so stupid. But like, if you tell any video game person, they're like if there was a box and you'd go, it's just a box. They would know exactly what you're saying.
Exactly what you mean.
And that's like so stupid, but so funny. I've always looked at lockers, especially when I got to high school after that, because this is before we went to high school, and go like, couldn't fit in there. What are you talking about? So this amazing game, and created a huge series too.
Yeah, and people always talk about the stealth, like how it revolutionized stealth play and things like the box and how you can hide it and enemies would walk by. And, and the radar that showed their field of vision. But for me, not enough people talk about the puzzle mechanics in the game. I'm thinking about Psycho Mantis, and the way in which you beat them is by plugging your controller into the second port. I'm talking about the area where you have a key that you need to make blue by going to a cold area and then red by going to a hot area. And when blue or red, it opens up different elements of the map. Like those sorts of things were just so... I was like, I didn't realize games could work on that level, like in this meta way. And Metal Gear as a franchise became very meta old gear, if you know what I mean.
Oh my God, this is Liza P all over again. Elliot, you gluing that? Clocking that?
I turned my nose up to Metal Gear Solid.
No, it doesn't work like that.
I don't understand what this joke is.
I can tell. All right, my number 6.
Yes.
I don't know how long we have to talk about this.
Okay.
Because it's come up a lot recently. It's Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
I'm so happy that's on your list.
It has to be.
Yeah.
This is another game where like I constantly am like, well, are you lying to yourself? This goes into the SimCity 2000 comfort gaming thing. I remember being one of the clearest memories I have is you and I played this game a lot together.
Yeah. Oh my God.
When we were kids.
The whole franchise, really.
Oh, absolutely. But one of the very clearest memories I have about this game was being 15 years old and working in a kitchen at a summer camp. 15, by the way, not allowed to get a job, but whatever, get paid in cash. You can do whatever you want. And in the summer camp was this huge, it's like 100-acre property, right? And some of the staff, especially the lower grade staff, stay in these kind of like dilapidated cottages, but they are just old cottages, right? And they have, holes in the roof and stuff like that. But you live there. And one of them was this, somebody brought up their like grandparents' television, which was like heavier than I was at the time.
Yeah.
And we played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Also, you had that at the camp. That's amazing.
And we would just pile in at night and drink beer and play this game. And it was like both competition but camaraderie. And I have the clearest memories of like trying to do stuff and like laughing to the game. And it was just the background to not only music and gaming of a summer that I'll have for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And it just, this is the part that video games can become, that it creates bonds and friendships and memories that you'll have. And this one, being a social one and being a cooperative one too, is just so much fun. And it is a relaxing game for me. When the remaster came out, I downloaded it. And when I don't know what to play, I'll just boot up a couple of rounds of the warehouse and I'll be very happy.
It's great. It is a sense memory at this point. And so many of my top choices are choices which have a link to a place in time, like you're talking about with Tony Hawk.
Yes.
So it becomes ingrained with this, with being with the whimsy of being youthful again. You know what I mean? Like when I talked about it first, like I don't experience joy in the same way I did when I was a kid. So these moments are so integrally tied to my memories and great feelings I had when I was a child, similar to your Tony Hawk thing. And I had that as well. Like the first time I played a Tony Hawk game, I couldn't believe how cool I felt.
Yes.
I just felt cool. The music, what I was allowed to do, skateboard culture being represented in this mainstream way, seeing like, I wouldn't have ever expected Tony Hawk to be represented in a video game. Like I know now like extreme sports are all over video games, but those two worlds never met before.
No.
There was counterculture and there was pop culture, and never the twain shall meet. And this was one of the first times I remember those two circles kind of joining. And Tony Hawk, specifically number 2, I think, was the peak of the franchise. I always point to number 4. The introduction of the revert was great for me, but number 2, if you combine like where I was at in life and just the refinement on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1, was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is what, number 6? I think it is.
That's your number 6.
Number 6.
My number 5. I think this has to be on your list somewhere. In fact, maybe all the way at the top. I don't know. We're going to talk about games as art. You have to talk about BioShock.
We will be talking about it.
We will be talking about BioShock.
Yeah,
so we're going to move on to your number 5.
Okay, my number 5. This is the most Andrew Core pick of all time, but Age of Empires number 2.
Good. Yes.
I love this game. Real-time strategy games were not always games that I always flock to. I outside of these very specific Red Alert, Command & Conquer, Age of Mythology games, I never really played a lot of, like StarQuest and stuff like that.
StarCraft.
Yeah. Clearly a sign I never played it. Those aren't games that I played, but this game had such a hold on me.
Yeah.
Going from Command & Conquer to this to Age of Mythology, and this is really the one that will always leave an impression on me. I love history. I was such a kid that loved this kind of stuff.
Did you like history before Age of Empires, or did Age
this
of
definitely
Empires
helped? This definitely helped. There were like the fact that I knew what the Teutons were. Like, it's like people are like, what?
How they got that powerful? They just farted a whole bunch.
Well, they were mostly farming beans. That's why, though. People don't know that.
Makes sense. And they were always fighting with that empire that was pretty much just sitting beside couches all the time.
What is that?
The Ottomans?
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess when you
just
think
the
about it.
farters and the Ottomans. Like, what are we doing
What
here?
are we doing? And it's so funny to see how they've fallen, because we don't like farting and not a lot of Ottomans anymore.
Not a ton of Ottomans.
The world, man. We used to be a civilization. Age of Empires. A real-time strategy game where you built a civilization through age periods. We started out as like kind of a hunter-gatherer society, and you'd build yourself up into a medieval, beautiful medieval empire. And you'd be constantly battling. There were victories for economy and things like that, but it was mostly that you were trying to eliminate your other civilizations. And you'd start as one of many, many different types of civilizations. Some
Ottomans,
Teutons. What were the knights? They were Teuton knights? What is that? I'm missing something very obvious here. This is showing how much I know about history. Also showing how much your brain rots in 20 years. But all the different empires that you could use and the different specific unique individual items that you get or types of rules you get. It's just, I love this game. And because it was one that you could just start again, have a completely fresh and new one, and you would end after 40 something minutes, you'd be like, I'm gonna do this again.
Would you play the campaign, or would you just play map to map?
I would do the campaign because you just do the campaign, but I would absolutely just start as like a free mode sandbox, and just do it like that, and then shake it up and do it again.
Yes.
I loved one-on-one. I hated teams.
Yeah.
I loved it, or 3 separate ones that are all on your own. I loved this game so much, and it has to be one of the games I put the most time into, and one of the reasons it has to be on here is because ever since university, I've had a Mac. This game is made by Microsoft.
Yeah.
So there's obviously an interesting little conflict here. The number of times I boot camped Max and just to find ways of doing it, I still have my original disc, my CD-ROM disc.
That's amazing.
Because it's the only game I've never gotten rid of going like, well, if I could, I could always play this.
If the world ends, I'll find an old computer.
If there's not an online version that they don't, I always have this one. That actually says something. And so it has to be my top 5 at number 5 here.
This was the game when you were talking about SimCity 2000. I was talking around it because I figured this would be on your list, but of the perfect time for a game. Real-time strategy games, objectively to me, were never better than Age of Empires 2. The more they added to it, the more it ruined that special sauce. I saw this video on YouTube recently where Halo Infinite had code in it that was part of the code of like a really old Bungie game, like even before Bungie had the name Bungie. And it was there, the code was kind of a mess in Halo Infinite, but they were worried that if they started to remove things, that it would change the special sauce of Halo, because it would, maybe the floatiness would be off by a split second or something like that. And there's something about the special sauce that is this perfect level of retro that we had with Age of Empires 2 that just made me think like, fuck, I don't know if real-time strategy games have ever felt as good. We played the most recent Age of Empires, and it was great. It wasn't as good.
No.
I have gone back to play Age of Empires before, and when I did that, it wasn't Age of Empires 4. It was Age of Empires 2.
Absolutely. Now, there is a certain amount of nostalgia with this, and I will say, especially with mine and yours so far, we are not picking games just because we loved it as kids.
No.
There is something to be said that this might be actually the best version of it, more than the one that we had the most experience with.
I objectively think that's true. For me at least.
Yep.
For me at least, yeah.
Yeah, so Age of Empires 2, my number 5.
Great. I also spent a ton of time playing it. I'm glad it got some representation. Nice. My number 4 is a game that we did on this podcast. It's one of the highest ranked games that we did on this podcast, actually. In my opinion, infinitely replayable, innovative in the sense that there are no random enemies. It's all boss battles, and it's as atmospheric, I think, as a game can get. This one is Shadow of the Colossus.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up. It's not on my list, but it's a wonderful game.
I think FromSoft games owe a lot to it. FromSoft games being so focused on these anthemic music drop, almost operatic battles that you have with these bosses, and that's all Shadow of the Colossus was. It was desolate until it was this like extreme battle. You'd go through this landscape to try to get to a new Colossus, to slaughter this beautiful beast just because the game was telling you to do so. For similar reasons, I think games were exploring this concept of agency. Similar to my last pick, BioShock, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the story of Shadow Colossus turns out it's a love story. You're trying to bring your partner back to life by killing these mythic beasts in this mythic land, and you don't know why. And the more you do it, the more you realize that maybe you're the bad guy. You're slaughtering innocents in order to bring one life back. And what a fantastic story that's told essentially without words.
Yes.
And only through environmental storytelling, which again is very FromSoft-esque. Shadow of the Colossus is just an absolutely incredible triumph. A game that I've played as many times, I think, as most other games. I played through that game a ton.
Nice. Oh, I love this. That's great. There's not much more to be said. We go back and listen to our episode we did on it. I think we are as effusive then as we are now.
Yeah.
It's just such a great game. Such
really
a beautiful, beautiful game. All right, so that's your number 4.
That's my number 4.
My number 4, I don't think it's going to be on your list now. Now we're getting to 4. It's going to be Last of Us 2.
No, it's not on my list. Yeah.
No Last of Us.
No Last of Us.
Okay. This is great. Last of Us 2. Here's what happens at the end. No, I promise you I'm not going to ruin the TV show. This is really hard between the two of the games, number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is remarkable in so many ways because of the story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah.
The lone wolf, little cub, story of younger person, older person, mismatched as they progress through a very scary world together. This is a story that's been around for 500 years.
Yep.
Why is this so interesting in a world of zombies? Well, zombies, we're so tired of zombies. There's so many zombies out there.
They're so scary, though.
They're so scary. Scary to eat your brains.
Christopher Walken.
Hey! Oh, yeah, right. That's scary for a lot of
he was
reasons.
up for the role of Joel.
No.
Ellie.
That's so bad.
The mushrooms are...
These very spooky zombies. What makes this game so amazing is it really just feels like something that is delivered fully completed.
Yeah.
You so rarely get something like this with a video game where you go like, it's like a small door into a world that you are going to live into. There's so often that people are like, do you like this? Do you like this? Microtransaction. Do you like this?
Some
pandering. They constantly remind you that it's a video game. This feels like you're stepping into almost like a play that you're like living. And what I love about it is between the music and the graphic styles, the voice acting, and the story itself are just so in depth, and they just are so atmospheric. They make you feel like you've traveled to another world.
Yep.
I love the world of Last of Us. Inside of it, they make decisions all the time that are challenging and interesting, and they question you as a person and a video game player, and what it's like to be right and wrong and guilt that's in your own hands. And Last of Us 2 especially highlights that. I love the characters. I can't wait to see what they do on television.
Yeah.
But even with that being said, it'll never beat the feelings that you had playing the video game.
No, I don't think so. Not for me, at least. Especially, you talk about The Last of Us, and at a time when Mass Effect was in full swing, and video games were all about choice and like, what character do you want to play as? I remember The Last of Us being really interesting and honestly almost frustrating, because Joel, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but Joel does things that I don't want to do.
Yes.
And it's like, guess what? You're not the protagonist in this one. Yeah. You're controlling Joel, but Joel is going to make his own decisions. And this is The Last of Us Part 1, but it carries on into Part 2 because the protagonists don't make the decisions that you want to make.
Yeah.
And I find that one of the things that I loved most about The Last of Us Part 2, and I think back about this all the time, when you and I did our like spoiler cast on it, it was like a 2-hour episode just on our impressions of The Last of Us Part 2. Yeah. You and I got into it about where we stood on two different characters, Abby and Ellie, who kind of like serve as almost, opposites in some ways in this.
There's a yin and yang quality to this.
Yin and yang. Where I finished The Last of Us and I was like, Abby is right. And you're like, you're crazy. Ellie is right. And we just could not come to terms with it, which in my mind is the basis of good art.
It's great art.
Whatever you're reading into it. And we talked last week as well about how sometimes a game tells a really good story, but doesn't balance mechanics into it enough where it gets to the point where I'm like, well, then why aren't I just watching a movie on this?
100%.
The Last of Us does a really good job of being a fun game to play and an incredible story. The weird element of like, I'm going to look through some filing cabinets while my friends are being slaughtered is like this weird urgency that you just don't have in any other medium, like, or anti-urgency. But apart from that, the way the game is crafted is brilliant.
I know. I promise I'm not going to ruin the story or anything like that, but I really want to talk about one specific thing about characters making decisions that are not often shown in video games. That you have Abby, who, if you've ever seen a picture of Abby, is a big, strong character who is very self-conscious, and she is very sensitive to decisions that are made around her and her own feelings and people that take advantage of those things. Those are not things that we talk about in video games.
Yeah.
People getting taken advantage of because they're emotional, because they're nice,
and
because they care for other people, especially when you put the frame around them of big and strong and muscular, is a really sensitive one. When you talk about Abby looking for safety and protection her whole life and then getting it and turning away from it, that's like a very real thing. This is the cheetah can't change its stripes or spots or whatever it is. You know what I mean? That is a real thing in humanity. We do all the time, but is never shown to be video games because they're so arch when we show them in video games. They have to be one way, that are oversized to even display the idea that to get it home, to hit it home, right?
Yeah.
This game does not do that. And they show things that you don't see often. And those are the ones that stick with me the most. So Last of Us 2 was a really tough decision between the two of them, but that's the one I'm going with.
It's the one I would have gone with as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll go to my number 3 now, and now we can finally talk about maybe the most magical feeling I've ever had in any video game ever. It has a simplicity that I don't think can be recreated, A, because video games have gotten a lot more complex, so we expect more out of them, and B, because this perfected that simplicity in my mind. It's Pokemon Red for me.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, I love that. We can talk about the differences afterwards about why Red and Yellow, but this was the Game Boy game that you received in the 90s, coming over from Japan, and took the world by storm, to the point that I don't think it has actually diminished at all, even though the way that people play the games is so much less now than it was previously. Yet their cultural resonance is just as strong as ever.
Oh, yeah.
And I think was set off because of these first couple of Game Boy games.
For sure. Yeah, it's as big a game or big as a franchise as we have in the world.
Yeah.
And is definitely making more money now as it did when we were kids. But when we were kids, it was our entire world. So it felt a lot bigger. But Pokemon Red came at a time where there was just something about this magic of, like, you mentioned it came from Japan, and I had a friend in school who got the Japanese version before it hit the United States. And
I guess
Canada.
Which one? Is it Leo Lee?
It's Leo Lee.
Oh, man, Leo Lee, yeah. What's up?
One of my best friends growing up. And I remember we would huddle around him, at recess and watch him walk around and catch Pokemon. And the idea of like catching these animals and having them battle and this style of game is one that RPGs existed back then with turn-based mechanics, but the idea of like leveling up animals and pets that you've gotten and having them battle and then relating it to the TV show that was going on at the same time. I 100%ed this game. I got all 150 Pokemon and I remember getting home from school and all I would do is just like plug in my Game Boy right next to the wall and play it on a little, just hot. Yeah. Play it on a little stool next to my outlet. And I just could not get enough of this game.
No, when the emulators were allowed inside of the Apple Store, this is the first game I got. Yeah. And I'm halfway through it, I think. I just got through Saffron City, very spooky. And
no, that's Lavender Town.
Lavender Town, very spooky. Saffron City is very spooky because there's pocket monsters running around. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yeah, you reach into your pocket, you're like, let me give this.
You build a wall. The formula just works. It works so well, and it works uniquely for these games. Like so many other ones tried to do it. I'm not going to say which Digimons, but like so many other ones tried to do it. And this one is just so unique and special. And the way that I have a personal connection, this is my Garrus, I have a personal connection to a unspoken like character. I'm like, that's my guy.
That's my guy.
He's like crazy to me.
It is wild. And Pokemon Yellow was cool because of the Pikachu element of it after you watched the TV shows. But I remember playing Pokemon Red and finding a Pikachu in the wild and being like, what the fuck? I got a fucking Pikachu. Like, this is amazing.
Like it's the rarest one out there.
Yes, exactly.
I chose Yellow. I can understand completely why I chose Red. And I would have chosen Red if
it's simply just the one that I played.
Yes. Yeah. I chose Yellow after, because I think I beat Red and then got Yellow because of the TV show. And I think that is I wanted to highlight it because it's such an amazing convergence of pop culture and going like, oh, you like that TV show?
Yeah.
Well, it's a video game, right?
Yeah.
We'll just give you the version of the TV show.
Yeah.
And I love that because the characters of Team Rocket had a, outsized presence in Yellow with Meowth being their actual character and Gary having a very different kind of style to him. And I loved it so much because they were giving you kind of what you wanted.
For sure.
Which is so odd.
But it was too similar to Pokemon Red to justify me going back and playing through it in the Yellow version.
Totally
but man, you say that you've gone back and played it. I've tried to get back into Pokemon games since then. And this is something that I've just even like if I go back and play Age of Empires, I can have a fun 40 minutes or so with it. But Pokemon is still like a 50-hour game.
Oh, it is.
Like I don't have the patience anymore. I've moved past the play style of walking in tall grass and the random element of, I just found an Abra, huck a ball at him before he teleports or something like that. It doesn't speak to me in the same way, which is such a shame because I can visualize how I felt when I was playing it as a kid, and I'd love to be able to tap into that. But this is the peak Robert Frost. You can never go home again. Like I cannot play a Pokemon game and get the same sort of feeling. It'll work for like an hour, and then I'm like, okay, I'm a little bored now. I don't think I'll ever play through the game again.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to, but I totally understand that. I just, Pokemon, we can make a whole series about Pokemon in general. It's amazing. Yeah. It's so cool. I should have worn my Pokemon shirt today.
You should have. Why didn't you?
Well,
you would have buried the lead a little bit.
Yeah, I would have been like, when I went to Japan, Uniqlo, which is not a Pokemon owned company.
No.
Had 3 floors for Pokemon stuff. And I was just going like looking around like, oh my God. Like
Uniqlo has some cool Japanese anime clothing lines, like licenses that they work with. Yeah.
Uniqlo is everywhere there. So okay. So that's your number 3?
That's my number 3.
My number 3 is my oldest game on the list. Super Mario World.
Okay, World.
Do you have another Super Mario?
My number 2 is Mario 64.
Okay,
but let's join these together because
together.
they were representative of the franchise for me, for sure.
I love it. Okay, I'll start first because the World came out before Super Mario 64. This is just, in my mind, what video games are.
Yes.
Like, even though I'd played video games before Super Mario World came out, I'm old enough to remember the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis generation coming out.
Yep.
I was kind of like briefly aware of this at the time. Like, I wasn't, raptured by it, but I was like, oh, these new things are coming out? That's pretty cool. And then seeing that and playing so much of it that the sounds, the way Mario moves, and the colors are just burned into my brain of what video games are.
Yeah.
They are bright, they're fun, they're scary, they challenge you, but at the end of the day, they're fun and safe.
Yes.
And I think I love this game so much. I think its general aesthetic is what heaven probably looks like. And I can't get enough of how much fun and just quality this game is through and through.
I struggled between Super Mario World and Mario 64.
Oh, yeah?
I really did.
Okay.
But ultimately, I went with Mario 64. I think that Super Mario World is a more playable game today, weirdly, even though it's older, because it's 2D, but it is peak 2D gameplay. But there was that magic feeling I had the first time I was running around in the garden in Mario 64, which everyone whose first experience with 3D games was that. I imagine that the way we talk about running through the garden in Mario 64 for the first time is, and now people probably laugh at us, is the same way we laugh at the people who are like, I was in a movie theater and the train came right towards me. I dove out of my seat. Dog got it. Dog got it. They say for some reason.
Yeah, they do. Got it. And that's a slur back then.
It's a slur. He was talking to,
I guess, Protestants.
But that feeling I had was just, it awoke this feeling of like, I didn't know games could be like this. To control in 3D space, I felt so free, and it didn't matter that the controls weren't perfect because they were the best that we had back then.
Yeah.
And the idea of jumping into a painting and that whimsy that you had the first time you turned on Super Mario World and seeing the painted colors and the music and the everything just looks so vibrant. The same whimsy I definitely had the first time you jump into a painting and it goes like, whoo, and you're in this new world and you've got a couple missions to do. Both of these games, like Mario as a franchise, it's become so ubiquitous that you almost overlook how great it actually is. But it's just peak video games.
It really is. I'm so glad we have two different iterations in this list, because I think it's just so fair that, of course, Mario would have this. Mario is, you know how your mom would like call your PlayStation a Game Boy? Mario is what video games are to people. Like, stop playing Mario and it's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes, exactly.
You know, I just
on your Microsoft X Cube.
Yeah. You're in a VR headset and you're like, what? It's hard to overstate how important Mario is and how still playable. How much Nintendo has protected the quality of their product, and still almost every version of this is like incredibly playable and 100%. Enjoyable. We're just choosing these two because they meant the most to us.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah. So that's your number two.
That was my number two. So what is your number two?
My number two. Wow, do we have any? I have one left that we need to talk about.
Yes.
My number two is going to be Red Dead Redemption 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was, okay.
Yeah, it was tough between these two.
Yeah.
But Red Dead Redemption 2, I think, is just, will probably be a chapter point in video game history of explaining what this era was like. It is both the best combination of actual video games in the way that you can do so much inside this game. You know what I mean? You can ride a horse, you can shoot guns. Yeah, absolutely. But you can also hunt, and you can also go to a brothel, and you can, ride a train, and you can rob people, and you can do all these things.
You have more than one blaster.
You have more than one blaster. You have two. No. You have a wheel of guns and things like that. But more than that, it was the story that I think really hit home. And I always think about this because the best version of this is, there are video games for video game's sake. There are video games that are very video game-y. And I say that in the way that, like, you got to like video games, and then you go, oh, this is very good.
Yes.
But trying to explain to somebody that doesn't play video games is kind of tough sometimes. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the best version of a game that is really good, and video game people will like it. And I can also show a layman this, and they go, whoa, look at this.
Yeah.
And I think about this because my player one has beat it twice.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And there would be times that she has on the television, and I'll walk by and I go, look at that. Like, it's a mountain range and there's like a sunset, and she's like picking herbs or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Jesus Christ, that looks good.
Yeah.
And you can't believe how good it is because it is, a couple states worth of country land. And
6 years old. How old now at this point? 5 years?
I know, without
like
a remaster and without everything. And I don't even care that it comes out. It's just more that I can't believe how good it looks. The story is incredibly defining and something that I'll think about all the time. The way they develop characters that are not just Arch, like we're talking about.
Yep.
I just think this game is a triumph in almost every aspect. And to the point that I don't want to race out and buy Red Dead Redemption 3 whenever inevitably it comes out.
Yeah.
If they ended on number 2, I would absolutely be satisfied with it. And that goes against every other video game in my history of, instead of playing Street Fighter 14. I'm okay that Red Dead would end at 2 because it was such a great game.
Yeah, I knew it would be on your list. I mean, you talk about it as much as I used to. The joke that we used to get all the time was we're supposed to be talking about retro games and all we'll do is talk about Overwatch and Red Dead. Like, they just came up all the time. Yeah, Red Dead I struggled with a little bit just because, like, I have so much respect for the world. I think it is a brilliant game. I think it is one of the best games ever made. But it has that open world element. Like you said, you can do anything. You can pick herbs, you can fish, you can play poker. Ultimately, my opinion is that doing each of those individual things isn't very fun, but a lot of people don't care about that as much. They just think that it fleshes out the world in a way where it's like, you could do whatever you want. I'm more engaged with the how beautiful the game looks, how, like you said, how wonderful the story is, the end of the game and the ways that they decide to bring about characters ends is so mature again for gaming,
Rockstar.
for Rockstar especially. But Red Dead really did signify that, like, we think about Rockstar as a mature game, like they not mature because you're cutting people's heads off, mature because the stories that they tell are very mature.
They are.
Red Dead 2, it wasn't always that way.
No.
You had Tommy Vercetti in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. You had like even Grand Theft Auto 4 was pretty dark, but had its hilarious elements. Grand Theft Auto 5 was very boisterous and loud.
Yes.
But now we look at Rockstar as like, they tell good, heartfelt stories, and that was really the game that changed that.
It is a quiet story of the redemption of a man. Like
the Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, well, I tried to use that word actually in key, so thank you for highlighting it.
You're welcome.
But
the second time he did it.
Yeah, also, is and the end of his life and what you can do
when he coughs. He looks at his hand; it's red.
Yeah, and he knows he's
dead.
Yes, I can't say that is a very good way of putting it, Mikey. It is a mature storytelling. No, I'm not fucking giving you credit for that. It's a mature way of telling a story.
Yeah.
And I think that's what leaves me with this is that a person that takes somebody under their wing only to betray them and use them, and somebody to fend for their honor. Like, I think that's like such a beautiful way. And it's, yes, of course, the end of the story, which I think people know, so whatever, but is that like, you don't go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that is so beautiful because that's how we all will die, probably.
Yes.
So
not me.
No, you're gonna go Blaze of Glory.
Blaze of Glory for sure.
I'm thinking empty elevator shaft. Just take a step. Oh no!
I'm gonna step and shoot myself in the head before I hit the ground. It's gonna be so confusing for people.
There better be a pool of piranhas on the bottom. Yeah, I can't. I could talk about this game forever. I love it, and yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, my number 2 game of all time.
Amazing. My number 1.
Wow.
Game of all time. We've made it, Andrew.
I actually have no idea what it's going to be.
Oh, no?
No.
I mean, notably absent from my list is any FromSoft game.
Oh, fuck me.
So it had to be something like that. And again, I wanted representation of the style of game of FromSoft in general. So my decision was kind of between two games. I either thought the game that really got me into it, which is Dark Souls 2, or the game that I still point to as the best of any Souls-like, any FromSoft game, it's Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Bloodborne is my favorite game of all time, and I'm not ashamed to say it.
I didn't know if it's... I thought it was in Dark Souls 2. Why Bloodborne over Dark Souls?
Because Dark Souls 2, I think ultimately was the game that got me into the experience of playing a FromSoft game. Like, I played through most of Dark Souls 1 before I bounced off of it. I put like 60 hours into it, and I was like, I can't anymore. Picked up Dark Souls 2, and about 30 hours into it, it finally clicked for me. And that moment playing that game where it clicked, I was just like, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
I understand this. This is fantastic. But Bloodborne was the one I think that aesthetically meant the most to me. It got me into a whole like gothic literature style. It got me into cosmic horror. The gameplay suited my play style a lot better. And I thought the boss fights were a bit more enjoyable. And this was like, I played Bloodborne with the experience of Dark Souls 2. So the entire experience I felt seasoned at and didn't feel as like back against the wall. What the fuck am I doing? But it was a close call. I think if you asked me on any different day, I could have chosen Dark Souls 2 for this one, but mainly because that was the one that got me into it. But I think the best representation of all of these games is in the form of Bloodborne.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Bloodborne. Yeah. I guess I should have seen that coming actually now that I say it, but yes, that makes sense. And knowing you and doing this podcast, of course, that'd be the best game of all time,
Of course.
Well, my number 1, I think we all know what it is because it was on Mikey's list and we were waiting this long. It's also a game that we've talked a ton about. And if you look over my head on YouTube, it is themed with some framed stuff up here. It is going to be BioShock. BioShock. What can we say? Why is it going to be BioShock? Well, for me, and I'm going to let you finish because it's on your list too, it is absolutely what makes video games so special. So often we look at video games and we go, this is a graphical masterpiece. Or have you done the fighting mechanics? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So good. I can't say anything about actually the video game parts of BioShock that I go, this is so good.
Yeah.
Hitting somebody with a wrench feels so wrench-like. No, I don't feel that way at all.
Well, how many times do you hit people with a wrench though?
Oh, a few dozen a week. But is that, this is what makes BioShock so amazing. It's not actually the little parts of the game that you go, that is so much fun. I don't care about this. I'll just stick with this game forever. It is the story that captivates you. It's a world that takes you to another place. and you just are propelled towards the end. Like you are running towards the end because you cannot wait to find out. And then the end is actually satisfying too. It goes against everything I just said earlier, where the ending doesn't need to matter.
With the exception of the final boss fight, I think. Notably bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost to the point that I forget it.
Yes, exactly. Most people do when you talk about BioShock. Yeah.
An overpowered near run. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Just checking.
No, Atlas, not Enderun.
Oh, Atlas. Yeah, sorry, yes. Atlas Fontaine. Yes.
I think so.
Is
the Fontaine head.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. This game. Just layers. Just like onion. Why is this so good? It's because of that. Because of the story. If I just said like hitting people with a wrench and throwing bees at people was so much fun, like that would be a different game entirely. And while that is not fun,
no, you can do it whenever you want. It's a video game.
Sending a murderer crows at people. It's a lot of fun. But what makes the story so much fun is it's a world that you, honest to God, feel like you lived in.
Yes.
You felt you lived under the sea for New Year's Eve, right as the world went to shit.
Yeah.
And what the world could have been like if you're doing it. There's so many things that I envision sometimes of like you get these TikToks or whatever, maybe just speaking to my algorithm of going like there's this one that keeps happening of going like if you wake up and you're the only person on Earth, here's what you have to do. It is like water will go bad after this amount. Nuclear power plants after 2 years will start exploding because they're not getting maintenance. I know I find that all to be fascinating. And you go, I wonder what that would be like. You have fantasies or visions of those things. I do the same thing with Rapture.
Oh my God, yeah.
What could have been? All this kind of stuff. This place didn't exist. And yet I feel the way of like, what could have been under there? Why do you have it on your list?
So most of the reasons that you've said, like I think that this was a spearhead of games as art. This, as someone who read Electronic Gaming Monthly every month, cover to cover a couple times, was the first time that there was this feeling like we had penetrated the outer shell of the world of gaming and kind of like gotten our tendrils under art outside of gaming. It's like the world was starting to realize that art could exist in games. Not art as in like, hey, doesn't Mario look great? Art is in like telling a story that was a very human story. Granted, they borrowed a lot of those themes from Ayn Rand, hence Atlas Fountainhead, Atlas Fontaine.
Yeah.
But the way that it brought it all together and the way that it moved you through it, it's like it's borrowing from all these methods of storytelling that you find in these other mediums. It's creating an architecture in a world that I think rivals any world that I've seen in any medium, and also is potentially, like, I know we love the world that Super Mario created, but because it's so whimsical and it's not tied down to anything, I feel like you can ask a question about Rapture and come up with the answer based on all of the clues that are in there. It's a fully well-realized world. It feels like it could have been a real experiment somewhere in the world. And then that whole process of like, this was a scary game, but you didn't know why. This was a sad game and you didn't know why. It was lonely. Every time you saw someone, there was simultaneously a feeling of, oh, fuck. And thank God I'm not the only one left down here. And it just brought so many different emotions. And the one thing I'll say, everyone who talks about BioShock says like, I don't think the game itself was good. I don't think the gameplay was good. I didn't mind the shooting with magic mechanic. I actually liked it a lot more than I think a lot of people did. Like firing the gun and like electrocuting someone when they were in a pool of water or setting them ablaze after they're covered in oil was still kind of novel at the time, especially for consoles. And I never thought that it impeded in the gameplay itself. I thought it was different enough that I was like, I like playing this game as much as I like learning about the world.
Yeah, it's functional. Like I would say, I don't think it's a highlight or anything like that. I don't think you go back to go like, I cannot wait.
I would go a little bit harder. And I think you're more on the side of most people who think that it's purely function.
Yeah.
But I actually did enjoy the gameplay itself quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the story and the set dressing of the whole thing is just unbelievable.
It's the best part.
When you walk into a new room and you see blood written in like a handwriting and you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And you just like,
telling the story through audio logs and context clues and
so many things of like you see a dead body but they're crawling towards something and then you're like, I wonder what's down there. Or if you treat it like you're a real person, which you're supposed to because you're hypothetically crashed a plane and you found your way to Rapture, is you're like every new door is like, oh, what fresh hell is this? Like what happened here? Like I think I got a Tommy gun and a murder of crows. So
Just shooting at a murderer crows. You're like, where the fuck does that keep coming from?
Yeah.
It's from my hand somehow.
Well, especially when you start, you're like, I'm gonna inject this into there, and then I think the first one you get is fire.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, cool, I lit someone on fire, and you're like, great, I'm gonna keep injecting that. I got fire. That's amazing. And then you're just like, bees. What the fuck? What the fuck was that?
You like spread your hand, and just a bunch of charred bees like fall to the ground, and you're like, shit, I shouldn't have done both of those. Just burning bees. Can't sting you, but it's like napalm or something like that.
Exactly. Yes, I love this game so much, but you're right. It is kind of where when I was talking about like the chapter ends and beginnings of video games. This is to me the one where going like games are good enough that we can tell amazing stories and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Instead of like, you know, I hate to say, but like older games, it's a lot of squinting at story, going like, oh, very cool in text and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, interesting. This one is like, I'm going to tell you the whole fucking story. And it's almost like an M. Night Shyamalan movie before you knew the trick, where you kind of go like, whoa, they could do this?
The would you kindly moment?
Yeah. There's a whole trick to this?
There's and also a comment on games as a medium itself, which is something that became more popular. Like Last of Us comments on games, you know, revenge and what it means to kill someone and all that. But for BioShock, and then BioShock Infinite did something similar to be like, hey, this is what you're playing. You're playing a game where every time we say, would you kindly, you have no choice. You have to do this.
I know. And I think BioShock Infinite, like, trust me, probably would have been somewhere on this list if I wasn't going with this one franchise thing. I really love BioShock Infinite. And it suffers because the first game was so great.
Yeah.
But their reveal of there's always a girl, there's always a lighthouse. It literally was the one that I know we've joked about this in the past. I actually just put my controller down and was watching the credits with my hands like folded like a child going like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
What the fuck? Am I a little puppet? Like, you know, am I a little Life of P? Like,
Liza P.
Liza?
Lies of P.
The puppet's name is Eliza?
Lies in P is what you do.
But it does. It makes you kind of question everything. And you go, oh my God, that is, you're right. Like I just do, you know, I think that game is more unsettling in like, it's kind of like Midsummer because it's unsettling in the sunlight. And you're like, how is that possible?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Whereas this one is of course unsettling because you're under the water and you're trapped and you're isolated. BioShock we could talk about forever. It's an amazing
franchise. Game. And Judas is the next game that Ken Levine is putting out. Not quite the same development company, but hopefully I have high hopes for that game.
I do too. He seems to have a real mind for this.
Also, speaking of, now that we've gone through our lists, Ken Levine, I think it was Ken Levine, helped make Gone Home, which was one of the first walking sims that really worked. And I was looking at my list. I'm like, how do I not have a walking sim on there between Firewatch, What Remains of Edith Finch, Gone Home itself? Do you want to go through some of our honorable mentions?
Yeah, like I could do this quickly because I limited myself to only a couple. Otherwise, I'd be talking for 10 straight minutes. My biggest thing that we talked about earlier was that we don't have any sports franchises on ours. The two I'd highlight is Madden and NBA 2K.
NHL for me,
Yeah, that have highlighted so much. The ones I would have included is Madden 2003, the one with Marshall Faulk on the cover. Love that game so much. And then NBA 2K12. That was the one with Michael Jordan. Just incredible. Those are the games I probably played the most. Yeah. And it's weird that they're not on there, but I think I explained why earlier.
Yep, for sure. Do you want to go one for one on our honorable mentions?
I only have a couple here, so I can go quickly and then I'll let you go. But Metal Gear Solid for sure. Nice. Left 4 Dead was very closely on there. And then Civilization was a last minute ad, but I love that game so very much.
Yeah. I've got a lot. Okay, I've got Resident Evil 4, Oblivion, Hyper Light Drifter, Death's Door, Dark Souls 2, GoldenEye.
See, this was the one I was talking about earlier.
I knew that was the one you were talking about.
If we didn't go back and play it, I'd been like, well, GoldenEye for sure. And now I go back and play it, I'm like, I don't know if I want to play this.
Yeah. But what it meant when it came out was, but then I feel like I represented that N64 era well enough with Mario 64 to be like, it was accomplishing the same thing, and Mario 64 is infinitely more playable than GoldenEye is today.
Yes, I agree.
Ocarina of Time or Wind Waker to have some Zelda representation. Super Mario World is on there too. Halo, Last of Us Part 2, Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Nice.
Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Was, I felt got representation through Mass Effect 2, but another BioWare game. Diablo 2, the game that ruined my body like more than any other game had. I spent all winter playing it and I couldn't do track and field when the summer came.
Oh no.
Batman Arkham City as a representation of that franchise. The Witcher 2, Uncharted 2. I had Red Dead Redemption 1.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
As my pick. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Banjo-Kazooie, Tetris.
Yeah, Tetris. I know. I thought about it.
Case of the Golden Idol, I think deserves a nod. And then when I was talking about a game that is purely mechanics and not quite story, but arguably considered, Katamari Damacy is a game I still think about all this time. Something that took such a big swing and rolled into my heart because you're rolling the things. but it's there too.
Well, so that's our top 10 best video games of all time.
Yeah.
It is not the 10 best video games of all time, and I don't care to see that list. That list sucks. I want to hear what your top 10 best video games of all time is.
Let's hear
yours, based on what you like. And if you give a little one sentence beside it, we'll read out some interesting ones.
Yeah, I think especially in the last episode, which is coming up fast of the main feed of the podcast, we'll read through if you want to include your top 10 or some honorable mentions as an inclusion to a little email that you want to send us.
Yeah. I absolutely. So like, I'm probably not reading whole list, but I'm saying like individual entries with a reason why I think would be awesome. Because there are so many games, we talked about before we started recording. It's like, I'm so afraid I missed something obvious.
We had to have missed a bunch of games.
Like I think there's thousands of games. It's really hard to, especially the ones that are hyper personal to you.
Yes.
Those are the ones that disappear because they're not going to show up on anyone else's list.
That's what I worried about. Yes. I missed something that I've mentioned 1,000 times on this podcast, but just didn't come to me in the time that I sat down. We also talked about off pod before we started recording, how hard it was to get this list down. Like, if you let me go another 10 minutes, I probably would have moved some of these picks up and down. Resident Evil 4 may have made it on the list somehow. Like, who knows? Any given day, this list may change.
I know. So, please let us know what yours are. We got 2 weeks left of regular weekly episodes, and then we're going to go with sporadically just things that we feel like doing. And so please let us know any other thoughts. If you love the podcast or have a memory or whatever it is, get back at us at the retrogradepodcast@gmail.com or on our Twitter account. Any DMs or messages would be nicely too. Okay. Well, until then, we love every single one of you, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. My name's Andrew Bascom, and with me as always is the Beast Boy of podcasting, Mr. Beast Boy himself,
Mikey Aaronworth.
This is the Retrograde Podcast.
Now, would you kindly send us a letter to show us your love?
Okay, we'll start writing now. Wait, what the fuck?
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Sure, I don't experience joy anymore.